Yeah. Everyone knows what to expect with me. There's no surprises.
I'll try and do a quick and painless intro, and then we'll go into quick and painless small talk.
When I see it.
So, welcome everyone to the Faded Connections Path of Exile community podcast. This is episode number 53. We're 3 weeks into the Ultimatum release, and there's a lot to talk about, really. Some people perceive it as a really good league, other people perceive it as a really bad league, and we've had quite some things happen, such as 2 big streamers, one from Russia and one from France, quitting the game and quitting streaming altogether. And it's a coincidence, but we got 2 experts on streaming full-time and quitting here in the Faded Connections with us. Welcome, Yoji and ProjectPT.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, great. I'm glad.
Am I wrong in saying we had booked both of these guests before either of the people quit, right?
I was definitely asked
quit
before anything of that happened, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that's convenient.
Well, and Catmaster, he went on a call with me and was like, maybe we want to talk a little bit about the Fuck GGG video because that was obviously a big part. And then this happened, and I was just like, now I feel like I'm just following the trend, even though it was going to be done. And it was just like, all right, sure, why not? I guess it works out.
I mean, that's what happens when we are trendsetters, right? The trend apparently followed us. Like, we set up the podcast and then, like, the world warped to, like, accommodate it. That's how important this is.
Yeah.
I like it. Makes my job easy.
Yep.
Soma was like, let's give these people something to talk about. But now that we already mentioned it, you've been away from the mainstream Path of Exile conversation for a while, ProjectPT. But I believe the FGGG video that you mentioned was 5 years ago, 2016, I think, beginning of 2016.
Yeah, so about 5 years.
Yeah, on the Xbox release, right? That was when it happened.
Yeah, it was timing wise was the manifesto of the Xbox coming out and. Yeah, roughly, and so that would have been 2016, early 2016, I think.
Yep. But it was during Breach League, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, 2.4.
Have to look that up. Holy shit.
It's a while ago.
But do you want to talk a little bit about the landscape of the game back then, like how you perceived it, and what was the underlying gripes, and what finally tipped you over and made you think, okay, I'm gonna stop this here?
It's always a very difficult one because if someone doesn't have a context of the different stages, it's very hard to explain double dipping poison meta to someone who never experienced it, because it is such a crazy thing that every build just put added chaos and poison on their build and destroyed the game. But not just that, like, the game's really fast now. Sure, it's not Val Spark fast, but one of the things I said in the video was, the state of the game where you just charge into a room, everything dies. That's still how you play the game. Because if everything isn't dead, all of those white mobs can one-shot you because of damage scaling.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit slower in terms of you don't have a skill that's activated and actively doing damage while you're charging through it, unless you're like Shield Charge Cock or something. But then so if you don't have a context of the speed before that, it's really hard to describe that to people. And then the other aspect being, which has related to some of the previous discussions with some of the other people quitting, is the Xbox release being when a company is investing money for the sake of making more money, not investing money to make a better game to make more money, and just like where that line is for each person, and when they're like, okay, that's enough for me. And that's kind of where that video fits in.
That was
please.
that was an interesting time for me, because when that video, I watched you at that point, and then that video came out and you quit, and I really disagreed with the Xbox part, and that led me to write off the entire thing and be like, look at this whiner. And then 6 months later, and I'm still like, everything else in that video was kind of on point though. And then we're now like 4 years later, and people are having a lot of the same issues, the exact same ones from like 5 years ago. With like the only bit that I don't agree with being like the Xbox thing. That I think that turned out rather well. But literally the whole rest of it, the same issues still exist like 5 or 6 years later. And that's a bit.
Same point
That's
in time, I think most people
a
who
lot.
played the game through any seasons can say the issues don't get fixed from season to season. So it's one thing to be like, oh, PT predicted something. It was like, no, the same thing kept happening. They kept not doing adjustments. Like the
Yeah.
big thing ended up being the desync. Obviously, pre-desync, post-desync, like that was such an incredible change to be in the game. None of this like OOS macros, and it's just like, oh, I died. Where was I when I died? Ah, I was in this corner of the map. Didn't realize
2
that one.
screens ago. Didn't make it around that corner. My bad.
Yeah. And I think the desync fix, the lockstep was a huge improvement to the game. Obviously, like dying to not knowing where your character is on the server is obviously a horrible way to die in hardcore, and is also annoying in softcore. But at the same time, it was probably one of the biggest points of power creep we ever got into the game, because it enabled movement skill spam and faster gameplay. Because before you just couldn't do it. Like if you, I don't know, whirling blades through 5 doors, you don't know after which of these 5 doors you get stuck on the server and actually like just die, because you had to play slow because you couldn't play faster. That was obviously a bad reason to play slow, but it like that basically opened the floodgates for all the crazy clear speed that happened afterwards.
I think one of the funny things about that is when we look at how accessible stun immunity is now in the game, if they would have just given us that accessible stun immunity before, we probably would have lost most of the desync. Because most of the desync is just like that mob touching you and just stunning you for a tiny fraction of time, and then you're just somewhere else.
I wonder though, is that just the way that predictive mode works, that you can't have a monster stun you on the server and have that on the client at the same time? Just, I mean, stun would usually not directly resync you, right? Like you would be out of sync for a while until you realize you got stunned.
Well,
Like a
yeah.
couple
So the
seconds back.
stun would desync you, and we never want to get too close into the code because like predictive methods, it's so that you can like continuously move and not necessarily feel the lag or whatever. So it's giving you like free access, but then the game is trying to like correct where you should be because it gave you a little bit of leeway. So that your gameplay was smooth, you pressed a dash. But on the client, it was like, couldn't have pressed dash because you were stunned. So it's like, aha, we have to reset you to where you should be, and that's where you desync and die.
Yeah. And because of like the stun depends so much on the actual damage roll on the mob, it's basically not possible to predict if you will get stunned by a hit or not. Like even if they get the predictive is seeing, okay, yeah, you're in the vicinity of a mob, it will hit you. It can never predict if you will be stunned or not until the damage is actually rolled, because a hit might stun you or it might not stun you. And it's
got dodge, block, damage ranges.
Yeah, that's so much happening, right?
Everything.
Well, not just that, pre 3.7, which would have been the Legion, was still that when a mob started its animation, it was guaranteed to hit you. So like if something,
yeah.
if it had the ability to trigger its auto attack animation, you could whirling blades 4 screens away before it finished, it was still hitting you. So then if that hit stunned you 4 screens away, boom, you're locked all the way back and you're just like, what the fuck is this? So that was one of the big things.
It's crazy how new that actually is. It feels so normal and natural to have in the game now, but it's
I feel
actually
that
quite
one.
new.
I feel that one so much because of playing in all mod leagues. Killing Hillock on melee was insane before.
Just dancing around him. Like
well,
crazy.
you couldn't dance around him.
Yeah, now you
because
can.
of the auto. Yeah, now you can. But before you couldn't, because if he started swinging, you were taking the hit, and if it was a crit, it was a one shot.
I think
so
most people just grab the bow.
But if you were solo self-found and you couldn't mule, so like if you're a marauder and you have heavy strike.
No, I saw people on like Nolu, like I don't know what his name is, like the guy who played like tons of RF. He actually dropped a bow on his Marauder on Twilight Strand and decided to auto him down, like instead of going melee, because it's just on average easier and faster.
I had to do, you counted 9 steps. At 9 steps, for whatever reason, he would stop for like
Yes.
half a second, so it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whack! All right, walk away. 1, 2,
God.
3.
I absolutely remember doing that in like hardcore races and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
Lamp.
Or
Lamp.
whatever, trying to get through as a melee. You just sit
Yeah.
there running circles around him, just counting out loud.
In case if anyone watching doesn't know what that is, so PT used to and still sometimes does. I think it's currently running as well, like ultra hard private leagues up to every single mod enabled, but also like variants where you could like trade or where you could have vendors.
Yeah,
or
current
something.
one is trade. I
Current
think
one
it's a
is
little bit
trade,
more
right?
fun with trade because then you get like something that's rare and it's valuable. You're like, oh, a support gem.
Yeah. Because you don't have vendors, right? So you basically have no support gems except for quest rewards and drops for everyone. And I don't have a stash, so you can only keep what you can keep. Plus, like some shenanigans with crafting benches, I think. But yeah.
Yep. We're allowed meals on this one, where PSO people are like throwing things in the menagerie and then jumping on another character and then looting it. So it's like D2 looting system.
That's cool.
Still pretty limiting though.
It's
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very limiting. They can barely sometimes like make proper builds during the campaign that get for like 3 or 4 support gems that they can use, which
I think
is telling about the whole gem system, reward system in itself.
when you turn off the vendors, especially since they made it that you could buy supports from vendors, they've stopped organizing the skill gems in a way that it would make sense. Like, oh, there's the support gem you would need, and it becomes very clear. Like, you grab some of the rewards, and you're like, there's no supports for this skill whatsoever. Like,
What
okay.
always rubs me the wrong way with that is that when you do Tidal Island as a witch, you get poison support offered from the quest reward, but if you don't pick it, or if you pick it, you can't buy it from the vendor afterwards. It's like a quest reward, but it's not a vendor gem. You can't buy it as a witch. You don't get lesser poison. I don't know. It must be an oversight.
That's super. That sounds like an oversight, but like it's been like this since they introduced it, right? So
Yep.
oversight.
So it must be intended.
I think it might be an oversight that no one really cared to fix yet.
Not enough people have complained.
It's just weird because, I can pick Ali Proliv and I can buy it afterwards, but just not the poison. So it's like when you pick the wrong one, you feel like you arbitrarily messed up your run. But yeah, Yoji, do you want to quickly give the same background to your sort of quitting PoE as a full-time content creation career, so people who don't know can be aware? I mean, I know you're one of the original members of the Bayclast podcast, and
That's
you've
true.
done various podcasts here and there.
Yeah, the Baycast podcast thing actually happened like right after I basically decided to not do full time, or like right in that same time frame. I basically just released the video, and like a few days after, I think Rise and QDog or Ziggy and QDog messaged me, be like, "Yo, dude, we know you're kind of like trying to take a step back from all this, but it would be really cool if we jump in like on Bayclass, at least for like a few episodes and stuff." Like Haki is hosting it, and I decided to do it because it was just, I think, once every 2 weeks or so. So that's definitely something you can still do when you're not full time streaming, right? And it sounded really cool. It was really, really fun, but there was like so much stuff going on. So basically, what I decided was, I never actually quit PoE. I played PoE through the whole time, even while I was not streaming it, because I still enjoy the game, and it have back then as well. Played a bit less because I just had less time, but if I had more time, I would also have just played more. I still made like few videos, like I try to do like one a month, so like some people would like still like have like an update what was going on, because I never like intended to not come like back a little bit. But I was clear for me that was at least like a year and maybe a year and a half where I could just time-wise couldn't do it, because I was moving during that time frame. I was moving, I think, like 4 or 5 times, and I knew that a lot of that was planned. Like I was moving for a time, I was moving in with my grandma, for example, because she was like moving into like a care facility, but I was like helping her take care and stuff. And I wanted to move like from Berlin, where I lived at the time, to the north of Germany. There was like a lot of stuff happening, and the whole PoE reason stuff why I stepped back from full-time content creation was because I kind of like lost the fun in my hobby, which was like mainly gaming. It's like one of my main hobbies since ever, and I had the issue that I knew what to do to be successful with videos, especially like YouTube. The YouTube meta is pretty clear. It's still pretty clear right now. Like, if you know what to do, it's not super difficult to make a big YouTube channel in PoE, right? Even right at this point, like people have done it. Like, I think Big Ducks is, like, for example, a really good example of someone who does exactly what you have to do to blow up on YouTube in Path of Exile right now. Like, he's doing all the right videos, he's doing all the guide content that you have to do. He's doing it consistently, and that really works. And those have never been the videos I had the most fun with. So I didn't just want to do that just to make it work. Because I always felt like if you are doing full-time content creation but you're not enjoying it, might as well do a job that pays better that you're not enjoying, or try to find a job that pays better and that you are enjoying. But either way, should not be that difficult, especially if you have like a degree in a STEM field like I do. It's not that difficult currently to find a good job that is also like really fun as well. So I decided to do that, and yeah, kind of basically turned my hobby into a job, and then yeah, I had a job and I had no hobby anymore, and that was really annoying. That's kind of like the TLDR of that. And yeah, but I always intended to try to make it work as a part-time thing, and I think I'm super happy with where I'm at right now with the whole thing, because I think that was the best decision. I still have like a lot of fun. I'm happy whenever I get more time to do it, but I don't have problems when I have less time to make content, or if I'm like out of ideas, or if I don't like a league, I just don't play as much, and it's also fine. Like, I don't have any real life implications of, oh, I have to get up and play the game, and I'm not feeling like it anymore. Like, stuff like that doesn't happen. But yeah, I still have to have a community that's super fun to interact with. I feel like I get all the upsides of being a streamer without any of the downsides currently, which is super good.
So the just to be very clear here, for you, the main reason to quit the full-time content creation was not on the game side, but more on the content creation side of things. Or were there things at the time that you were unhappy with in the game?
I mean, there have always been some things that I was unhappy with, sometimes more than others. Like, PoE has had some times and errors where I had a lot to criticize about the game. It had some patches and where I was super happy with how it was, or like pretty happy with how it was. And at that time, it was like kind of like so and so. There was a lot to criticize. It was a bit before the PT did the like video about the Xbox. It was before the Xbox release, I think, or was it afterwards? I don't actually know what time frame wise that even was. But yeah, the game did not play a major role because I kept playing. Right, I still enjoy the game enough to like play even if I don't make content. And I've actually never stopped playing PvE since I started. Never like really fully stopped. But yeah, there's a lot in the game that I think is still a bit annoying, and a lot of issues have been so long standing that it's actually pretty crazy that we still put up with that. And others have been actually fixed really well. I think there are some things that back then I found really annoying, or things I felt just the game lacked that we don't have anymore. But yeah, it was not mainly the game, no.
Oh, that's great though, because then we have like two very different perspectives on the whole topic that's coming up. But quickly before we do that, ProjectPT, do you want to quickly tell about your quote-unquote comeback to Path of Exile when you got peer pressured into checking out 3.0?
Yeah, memes. Because obviously anyone quit, it's, see you back at X. I didn't come back in 3.0. And I remember quitting, and people were like, oh, there's 6 new X. Oh, don't you feel stupid? I'm like, enjoy your reskinned X. And I came back, I think, very quickly at the tail end of Bestiary League. When did the private leagues come out? That was 3.4, 3.5?
It was before Legion.
Yeah, it was before. Synthesis definitely had no lube, because I did no lube Synthesis League, and that was fun.
It might actually have been Synthesis, right?
No Loop was also in Betrayal. I remember that was when I played my Toxic Rain in No Loop during Betrayal League. Because for the largest part of Betrayal, I actually played Softcore. Because I died like 2 weeks in, and I was like, okay, so solo self-found hardcore is fun, but I really want to make this build happen. And then I went to softcore, did my Frostblades thingy, and then towards the end of the league, played in PT's league. So it must have been around Betrayal.
Yeah, I'm gonna open the wiki and like look at the patches just so we get like a little bit more accurate about this. But yeah, you keep going. I'm just gonna look some stuff up.
Yeah, so the private leagues was what brought me back. In theory, it was everyone. The direction is very similar. There can be kind of notes here and there, but when my big issue was the speed of the game, and the game has, maybe slowed down a bit, but it is kill everything before everything kills you as a standard, even in hardcore, perfectly fine, but that's not going to, that direction isn't going to change. Private leagues, when that was announced, it's like, oh, this is a system that I can potentially adjust the game a little bit so that it caters more towards me without necessarily sacrificing from the base audience. That's a system that can work for me. So my coming back is very specifically private leagues, and there's only been maybe one league I've actively played outside of the private league, which would have been the Heist League. That
Really?
being
Oh.
said, yeah,
I thought
or
it was
sorry,
Metamorph.
not Heist, Ritual. It's just Ritual League, not
Okay.
Heist. Or Heist League, I think I played 6 hours, and I was like, yeah, no, no.
Doors, hello, doors.
I'm sorry. Did you not like your reskinned Haku missions?
Uh, it just
They were
let's
Haku
let's
missions,
not
man.
even.
I hated Heist so much.
I actually enjoy Heist now as like a change of pace, but
I
I
have
like
not
that you
stepped foot in the Rogue Harbor since Heist League.
I mean that's fair. Like I think that's actually a strong part of Heist that you can ignore it or not, and you can engage it at your own whim. Like if you feel like you want to do it, you can do it, and if you don't, just don't. I think that's actually a strong point of Heist because it's so divisive and a lot of people like it. It's kind of like what the lab should have maybe also had, because forcing people through labs has always been a point of contention, and I think it's good that Heist doesn't do that.
Oh, just because we were talking about before in context of old players, when the lab came out, which I hated, Chris said it was optional content. And Ascendancies, I remember also Ascendancies being not a significant amount of power to players. That was where. So when we
That's
talk
fun.
about
That's
when,
like the only thing
When
that
does that
matters now.
directive start? Wait, when was it
So-
stated?
that would
Was
have
that before
been
it came
mentioned
out?
like 2.1 when it was coming out. Yeah, because I was anti Ascendancies.
Yeah, I know, but like for very different reasons, right? You were anti-ascendancies because it was too much power creep and not like too generic bonuses. But then why were you against the lab mechanic itself? That's I'm curious about.
The lab, it was basically kind of the force powers Yoji was saying. Like if it would have been a little bit more optional, as if Heist was have been, that would have been great. Like a side way to get power, but it was not for a long time. For a long time, it was quite painful.
Of course, now Ascendancies are so important. That's what you start when you're building a character, when you're planning a character. First thing you're like is, what Ascendancy am I playing?
Yeah. You narrow it down to like 2, maybe 3, and then you like start with maxing, maybe making trees around the like starting points, and that's but it's always like, okay, what Ascendancies make? It's like more than half of the power of the character level progression wise, at least. Like gear, of course, is still a huge part, but like passive tree versus Ascendancy, the Ascendancy matters way more.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Trying to imagine my current build without ascendancy, it would not work.
Yeah, you can unspec it and try.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Gouda made actually a video back then, where I think was like around Ascendancy, maybe I1 League later, where he had made an Elementalist, I think it was like an Ignite something build, and he had no passives, and was still clearing like early endgame completely fine. Yeah.
I wonder why that's not a private league mod.
No
To
passives.
just get rid of lab. Like everyone's just a base class. Enjoy yourself.
Oh, and I thought that was the other way around. He had the ascendancy passes, but no like tree passes, right?
Yeah, he had only Ascendancy. He was an Elementalist with like the Ignite conflux nodes and stuff, and was clearing just fine. He had 0 passes, and like at the bottom it said like, I don't know, like 80 passes unspec'd or whatever.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Gouda's content was always pretty good though.
Gouda's why I started creating content for PoE.
Really?
He's also a huge influence for me as well. I wouldn't have started without him.
I vividly remember the video where the curse scaling allowed him to freeze that rogue exile mid-air with temp chains reducing the action speed to 0 and like freezing his life regen so that he would actually degen down to his own blood rage. That was glorious.
They fixed that like in like 2 days or something as well.
Yeah.
That was like super crazy. He had a lot of these things where he just I made a thing. GG, no. That is
I
unintended.
saw one of his videos where he'd slowed himself down with leap slam so much that it took like 6 minutes to do a leap slam.
Yeah.
And so it was just this super slow in the air, just hanging for ages.
I love this his showcase where he was had a 0% quant build and was like seeing if stuff still drops. And he found out that if he has 0% quant, not even maps drop actually.
Yeah, because that was GGG was saying that quant on gear didn't affect maps. It was only quant on maps that affect maps.
Yeah, and like team
Coda was like, no.
No.
But
sorry,
the
you're
funny
wrong.
thing is, if he gets like to minus 99% quant, maps will drop like normal.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect maps unless you have absolutely 0 drops. Then maps are also affected. I think the reason for that is that people have speculated back then. I don't know why I still know this. It's so that Untainted Paradise doesn't drop maps because it has minus 100% quant, and otherwise it would still drop maps. That's what Gouda and I think like most people speculated was.
That's a pretty hilarious like hard code solution for that one.
Yeah, it's really weird, but yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because why else would it be like that?
I like because this would have been at the meta when I got tired and stopped playing when everyone was doing like, oh, look at my 1 minute 2 second gorge clear because that was everything. So Gouda was like, okay, I'm gonna post like a 53, which would have been a fast gorge clear, but it was 53 minutes because he took a speed build and he just went through the gorge.
53 minutes.
That's pretty good. Yeah, it was a very different game back then.
A little bit.
Yeah.
The one thing about him that always impressive is his gloves have held up for so long and so constantly. The gloves that were used for headhunters, the
self-curse gloves.
Yeah, self-curse gloves. Those are his.
It's his supporter unique, and they've been breaking the game since ever.
Well, that's only this league that they stopped the mass use of those.
Yeah.
Like,
but and
the
it's just
first
like
time.
the legacy of how well he designed his unique.
Yeah. Because most user designed uniques fall out of favor really quickly or get outpower creeped.
There are a few creative ones, but yeah, most of them are not that creative. The cool thing about these is also that GGG basically put them as like, oh, that's like a gimmicky fun thing. So they are like drop like candy as well. Like normally when someone makes a supporter unique and they're like absurdly OP, then they'd be like super heavy drop restrict, like Skyfall or whatever, right? And they just look at it as like, oh, what's this? What can you do with that? And just give it to everyone like Alkshot. Who cares?
I think the most outstanding example for that to me is the Xenocide Genius supporter gloves Oscarm. Before they came out, like Assassin's Mark on hit did not exist as a corruption outcome, and you couldn't get it anywhere. The Shaper rings didn't exist, so you looked at those gloves and you're like, wow, level 12 ass marked on hit. Okay, it does not have high life, maximum 50, and it does have a little bit of a downside, minus 10 to minus 20 chaos res, but that's super build enabling. And now look at where those gloves are. Like, I mean,
they're completely fine to use like super early mapping early in the league. They're like not useless or anything. You can use them like in like yellow maps and softcore really well early on.
That's true. They also have the accuracy stacking mechanic that interacts with Jug a little bit, so that's nice.
That gets used a lot.
Yeah, that actually gets used if you like lean into that. I think they're actually one of the better supporter uniques as well, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love them. I love the design. I love the gloves. It's just a little bit of a difference in perceived power level from when they came out to now.
Yeah, I think when he started designing them to like when they actually were implemented, there was like a huge time between as well. So I think the longer you take with like from concept to implementation, the more potential like everything can change, right? That was like pre-influenced items and stuff as well, so it was like a different world.
Completely.
Just the influence mods and even the Abyss mods, when they had a lot of the influence mods, just kind of were like, yeah, a lot of these uniques are instantly obsolete.
Yep.
Yep.
You mean Delph
So
mods, right?
many.
Delve, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the
Oh,
fossil only
I was just
mods, which
confused.
then a lot of them got turned into
It turned into influence
influence
ones.
mods. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really happy when that happened, but now I think we have the same problem with that. I think before I was really happy when that happened because before it was basically if you want a good item, you fossil craft it. End of story. That was like no other. That was the craft, like the item acquisition meta.
Yep.
And that's also an issue they never have solved. Like there's always, if you want to craft an item, do this. Do this used to be different things, but it's always mainly one thing. It's either multi-mod or it's like old regal multi-mod was forever the meta, then fossil crafting was forever the crafting meta, now we had harvest being the one and only crafting meta, and for some reason now we arrived at betrayal being the crafting meta. There's always found one thing to craft items, and they never really solved that.
Is
It
that a
is-
problem? Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it is actually a very difficult problem, though, right?
Yeah, it is a difficult
every,
problem.
Every stage of an upgrade is exponentially less likely to get the next stage of the upgrade. So, you have to take any slight advantage, or else you're starting to waste insane currencies.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about most people, they're just gonna trade for it because, like, the amount of currency you have to spend to lottery that return on investment is not favorable for most people.
I kind of think crafting this league kind of nailed it. Because like I've done a decent amount of crafting and now I'm spamming essences, I'm using fossils, I'm using ashling benches, I'm using harvest. I'm using every crafting system in the game instead of just one.
Okay. Nice.
But
It was
the
like-
top end is all betrayal, though.
But no, the top end ends with betrayal every
Yeah,
time.
Every time,
Betrayal
exactly.
is the end of your item every time. Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of similar to like where Harvest was before, where I mean Harvest was also
But you have to get the item there first.
the first step. Yeah, you have to get the item there first, but at some point you will like end up with let's say like 5 or 6 unfinished items, and then you farm betrayal for the next 6 weeks. That's what Harvest was as well. You could essence an item in a state where you're like, oh, now I have to finish this with Harvest, and now it's the same with Betrayal. You're like you fossil craft your item, or you out regal, like however you obtain like your base, let's say like 4 stat, 3 stat rare that you're like, okay, I get 3 mods that are really really good now, and then it's just Ashling Slam and all that type of stuff.
What Balor is saying, which is really good, is when Delve was the crafting meta was you
Just
don't
delve.
do anything but delve. Where
That's true.
now you are rewarded for knowing when to mix the tiers, and in that way, it is better than it's ever been for utilizing different endgame mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the same happened with Harvest. When Harvest was like at its full power, you just only ever harvested everything.
Yeah, because Harvest could do the chaos and the orc and the remove and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just
Although-
you just existed there.
Yeah, although you could like a lot of people would like do fossil bases for the +1 curse chest and then take that to Harvest to finish it or stuff like that. So
There were
But
there were a
it's-
few niche cases where you'd use something else, horror essence or something, but
Yeah.
most like 99% was just harvest only. And then in Delve League, 99% of crafting was just Delve only. Now I'm using everything. There are certain things the old regal and
Well,
use
now
everything.
it's still like a two-step process of like making the item and then finishing it off. But now at least you have a variety of different options for the first part, whereas previously it was only really feasible to do harvest exclusively because
Yeah.
you'd get so many rerolls anyway on the chase for the augments and the annuls. Now we just need like another system like Betrayal that kind of competes with Betrayal but excels at different things. And then it could be a very fun modular system.
I mean, in theory, Harvest still has orgs and removes for like non-influenced items. If you're like, for example,
Yeah.
crafting a weapon with like a fractured mod or whatever.
Emphasis is on in theory.
I've not
theory.
seen a single one this whole league.
Either.
I've not played that much, to be fair, but I've seen absolutely zero.
I
But then
believe
also
this-
I've had 0 exalted orbs drops, so that's pretty good.
I believe
can't-
this is the part where people always just quickly where people always quote Tai Killer who raced to 100 in SSF and did not see a single augment. Did all harvests.
I mean, even if you saw like 1 or 2, that's still ridiculously little.
Well, I think that becomes one of the very difficult things when we're talking about like so the crafts you're talking about, Balor, and when we're talking about mixing the top end, like this is for a ridiculous top end of players. And one of the interesting elements playing in like all mod leagues where we don't even get a stash is it's very hard to even get to the point where the rare stuff would even spawn, let alone do it. Like the current league mechanic in all mods, ooh, it hurts. So like we don't get rares, and the rares are valuable, and it actually really works because it's just like, do I want to die for those boots? And but at the same point in time, a lot of those, like, okay, when an exalt is that rare for someone playing as much or at the top end or constantly farming maps, there are like it's beyond unrare. It might as well not exist for a lot of players. And there's this thing where GGG is like, hey, here's something neat. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that is neat. And then they're like, okay, that's going to be the selling point. And like, oh yeah, that's neat. Now you don't get it. Why? It was the problem with Synthesis League. They showcased some really interesting things that could happen with the synthesizer machine. How many people actually got something interesting out of that fucking thing? And everyone was like, "Ooh, 2 life regen."
I got 17 light radius.
Nice.
How exciting.
Right? And it's like, what's the point of the interesting thing if A, you don't get it, or B, by the time you get it, it's obsolete to the character power progression. I played on softcore because I was like, ooh, Itsuri staff looks fun. It's an Uber Itsuri drop, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't want to farm it in SSF.
And series step is normal series.
Normal
I
at
think
Zeri.
I just farmed pair.
Yeah, normal. So drops off normal at Zeri. You don't have to link it. So if you think about
the staff,
progression,
I thought at series step. Sorry, I'm
sorry, the staff.
Yeah, the staff is from Uber series.
Yeah. So so it had some interesting values. You could do some things, some burns, some direct damage. I was like, okay, and I played with it, and it's janky. Everyone who's tried to do direct damage have, let's say, complained, or it doesn't quite do what it needs to when you talk about endgame or the league mechanic. But that's not necessarily its problem, because you're like, oh, you only have to 6-socket it, and that's value because you don't have to invest into the fuse, and it could be a leveling staff. Like if that would have been early accessible, really strong white-yellow power staff that saves you currency until you get your object that you want later, sure. But it drops off Uber at Zeri.
Yep.
So in terms of the power progression, yes, you can trade for it, but if you can trade for it, you can trade for something better.
Yeah, I think that staff is actually is probably not even the worst example of this, because it actually has the fun factor, because it's like a very different playstyle. You can only get it from this item, so you can always make the argument someone still kind of wants to cosplay as a Zeri and have fun with the thing, because I think it's really fun to use it, because like double flame blasting and storm calling randomly it's hilarious. It looks cool. I think a worst example of that is even actually Itsuri's Disfavor, which is also an Uber Itsuri drop. It's also a fairly rare Uber Itsuri drop, and it doesn't even do anything super fancy cool. It's just a fizz DPS bleed axe, and I wouldn't even be. I don't know if I would go into Uber Itsuri with that axe.
It's an okay axe.
Yeah, but like, if I was playing a slam build, going into Uber Itsuri, killing her with the axe that she drops is already something I can probably, until I get to the point where I'm like farming Uber Itsuri, I can get a better axe really easily.
Yep.
And
that's like, if you found that axe in white maps, you'd be like, on day one, you'd be like, oh, Pog,
yeah.
This is a nice axe.
It's like you find like it has mana early, and then you find like a Itsuri's Disfavor, you're like, yeah, nice, that's even better. And then you craft a Kurui chopper, and you're like, okay, and I can carry that to like tier 14s. Yeah, I think that's a progression, not the other way around.
And a lot of the time, it's just like, when we talk about underpowered uniques, they're fine if you get them the level that they're required, and you could use them as a leveling. But leveling is so incredibly fast, especially if you're using items that you've acquired from a different character, that like the window that unique would be good is like 30 minutes, and it doesn't drop in that 30 minutes. So, like, why?
Yep.
I remember spending something like 30 chaos or even more for Might Flay during the invasion.
Oh yes.
Invasion.
Yeah, I
like
remember
30
your Might
chaos
Flay Spectral
story.
Throw leveling.
Yeah, and you were proud of it. Like you're like that was an investment. It made these mobs easier to kill. I'm glad for it. You're not paying anything for a leveling item. Put on Vitality, grab a spell, a +1 level, and you're at yellow tier. Congratulations. Everything up to that point was a waste of your time if you know what you're doing.
I think I just leveled the character maps just today. That's what I was doing before this. And I think I didn't change gear from like Act 2 to Act 9.
That
Yep.
sounds about right to me.
That sounds pretty
Yep.
normal.
I put on the rest of my gear at like Act 2. That's a lie. I had one ring at level 44.
How dare
was
you
like-
lie to us?
I was
How
like, oh, I'll
dare.
chuck that one ring on. There you go. I'm
Yeah, sometimes
off.
you
See ya.
actually find like an item during leveling. I mean, for twink leveling, it's like a very specific case as well. I feel like during the first leveling, there's actually like enough progression happening. I think that doesn't feel like the uniques. Obviously, like, either you find them or you don't. But actually, I like the rare progression from Act 1 to Act 10 quite a lot these days. I think it's not bad, especially with binding orbs now.
Day 1 is quite good. I quite enjoy actual day 1 of a league.
I did
Brand
not
new
enjoy
character,
day one
everyone
this
fresh.
league, but overall, yes.
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot, but that was because the stream was hilarious, and not because of any gameplay, because there was not much of that happening.
I had the most fun of any league start I've ever played this league on day 1.
I
That
almost
was the
feel a bit
most
bad
fun
for it as well.
because I was in Discord with my team and we had stream up and we were just joking and laughing and stream was super active because no one was playing a fucking game.
Yeah, normally league start stream is like, and the queue's up, and Chad dies.
Yeah.
Chad dies. It's not coming
Yeah.
back for the next at least like 3 days. And you're just stuck there entertaining the 2 people at work watching you or something.
Like I was one of the people that got the like priority queue, but no one got upset at me because I just kept getting in, and all I do is like
Wait for your
meme
friends.
and joke at my friends on Discord, being like, "What queue? What are you doing? Get in here, let's go." I didn't actually go anywhere or do anything with it. Like I was like I'm leveling with my friends.
Yeah,
Like I'm not gonna leave them behind.
Great
You're gonna
meme.
wait.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting asked, "Do you have priority queue?" And I'm like, while I was in queue, like for 10 minutes, I'm like, "Does this look like any priority queue to you?" Like, seriously.
I did not get priority queue. I don't know why.
I actually waited like more than an hour to get in, and then when I wanted to make a character, I know vividly I couldn't delete my mule because of some sort of server error. And so I couldn't make a new character, or I was like, if I didn't have another free character slot, I couldn't make a character now because I can't delete my mule. And then I tweeted about it, and that's when I was messaged and I was offered priority queue, but then that was like, like 2 hours into the league almost, and that was just before they made the decision that no one gets priority anymore.
Nice.
So I never actually experienced it.
You had a
Should have
roller
just asked
coaster
for priority
emotion.
character deletion instead.
Right.
But we quickly,
We
I
also
just want
had a timer real quick. We had a timer
please.
and we were timing the disconnects. And our team was using me because I didn't have a queue to like decide when the timer would restart, because I could just like hit enter again until it let me in. And then they'd be like, all right, go, you've got 6 minutes. You can go through zones. And you'd be like going through lab. And then someone would get disconnected and the people in lab would be like, okay, well, I'm going to full clear this zone. And we're not loading into the next zone until Balor can log back in again. And then we've got 6 minutes to keep going through lab to try and finish it.
Yeah, but sometimes it would still disconnect you in the zone as well. I had that happen as well. It's
Yeah.
like it was a mess. I think like one guy in my chat cleared like Val Oversoul like 6 times, and we had people like starting lab like 5-6 times as well.
I had to
would-
do Act 5 Kitava twice.
I was
Aqua,
doing-
that's brutal.
like I like doing all the league mechanics while leveling, even though it's always inefficient just to get the comparison. Not heist, ritual. When I was going through it, I remember the first days had pretty ridiculous rewards that I am absolutely sure they nerfed, like double corruptions really early, tons of stuff. And so I was doing all of the mechanics with the queues, which rolled back a lot of the fights. But I remember one of the rewards I got was a wand in Act 5. And it was like a +1 fire, like tier 2 or tier 3 flat. I think tier 2, like the highest it could have had for the level. Tier 2 crit, tier 2 cast speed. It was a full tier 2 open suffix, and I was just like, I could sell this thing for 20 exalts, whatever, and I'm like, yeah. Fought the encounter, got the wand, went to the next zone, roll back. I'm like, oh, you fuckers. And I didn't have the wand anymore.
Perfect.
With all the early league duping going on, someone would have probably been able to pay 20x for it.
I know I sold some like wands from the mechanic early on for like 6 exalts on day 1.
That's
I was
crazy.
yeah. I got a replica shroud of the lightless on like day 2 or day 3.
Like day 1 this league, I picked up that mana reservation jewel that you get from quests and valed it on the spot and hit +1 RMR.
Yeah, nice.
And I threw it into guild with a garbage 5-link quiver for our runner. And then one of my friends who was playing a build that wanted the RMR was like, Pog, that's like one of our huge purchases from the first day, and you just hit it. Crazy good. And he took it out of guild and put it in his personal bank because it was for his build.
Yeah.
And then we all crashed. And then we all logged back in again. I had a copy of the bow. There was another garbage bow in guild, so we duped the bow. The garbage 5-link bow that wasn't even that good. We duped it by accident.
Yeah.
And then the corrupted jewel was gone. Wasn't in my inventory, wasn't in his bank, wasn't in the guild, gone. And I'm like, that is not a fair trade, sir. I would like my jewel back, please.
Take my bow. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And then everyone gets banned for duping the bow.
Yeah. But I lost like an actual good jewel.
It was like a garbage bow. It had like 6% attack speed or something on it, and it was just a 5-link. And I was like, well, that'll do for Toxic Rain because we didn't have a 5-link yet. And I'm like, whatever.
That's good. But I wanted to loop back a little bit. Just a couple of minutes ago in the conversation, we were talking about boss uniques being at the point where you get them kind of not powerful enough to justify killing the boss for them, let alone with them. And I wanted to quickly address how confused I am with the general direction that all the league-specific drops have been added to the global drop pool. Stuff like, what was Badge of the Brotherhood and Headhunter and Maloney's Mechanism and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, a lot of Conqueror drops or other boss drops have been also added to the global drop pool.
The Shaper Guardian drops and the
Shaper
Elder
Guardian drops, exactly, not Conqueror.
The Beltimber Blade and the what's called the Razor of the Moon, 7 Suns or whatever.
So I'm like a little
Elder and Shaper ones.
Yeah, a little bit confused as to like with the direction there, because on the one hand, the intention is clearly to put the best rewards back to the specific places where they belong to, but then at the same time, like taking these boss gated unique drops and adding them to the global drop pool is kind of the opposite direction for me. What do you guys think on that?
Conqueror stuff is as well in the global pool? Okay, I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
I remember Willow
Gift
and
stuff, right?
I have a theory.
We're here to talk about it.
I think this is prep work. I think there's a chance that the entire endgame will change. The ideas that we've got about the current Atlas or the way Atlases generally work are going away. And it might be significantly harder to be able to fight those particular Guardians. I think this might be a prep work.
I can see that, yeah. But it's a bit early then.
I definitely understand those, like that concept, but we always then run into that weird state of, why isn't something fixed? Is it going to be fixed in PoE 2? And it's like, yes, any change could be for something later, but it's like, okay, but the state of the game is now, because sure, maybe that gets an adjustment, but then is there going to be some other boss loot problem relating to X boss drops this thing that's the chase item, however it doesn't drop it at a high enough rate, so the divination card method is the fastest way, so people are farming the divination card method, and then that has to get adjusted, and you're always playing catch up at that point. So like, yeah, it very much could be prepping for something, but that doesn't make it make sense in the current game that we're playing and that they're selling.
Yeah. That's what always been my argument. Yeah.
Why prep it
I think
then?
that might be the reason, but I think it's always
Yeah.
also my argument against the PoE 2 will fix it or whatever. The current state of the game is what we have, and that has to make sense. So if they are like prepping in a way that makes the current game worse, they are probably doing not a good job at prepping for the whatever's happening. I think they, if that's the plan, and if this is prep work, like why just implement it like when you change the end game? Yeah, I can see that if you like Conquerors and Elder Shaper Guardians become super inaccessible, or even like completely removed, I could see even that happening, honestly. Because the Guardian fights, while they're kind of cool, they are also like maybe they're just at some point only part of the Maven endgame and not part of like normal endgame or whatever. But yeah, why change it now? I actually prefer farming bosses for specific uniques, especially in SSF, over running maps till it
Absolutely.
randomly drops by a huge margin.
Yeah, there's
Absolutely.
two sides to the story, right? On the one hand, some of these, like Vulcanus, are incredibly powerful in certain builds, and it's great that they're overall more accessible to people. But on the other hand, in stuff like SSF, you can't target it anymore. You're just if it doesn't drop, you're shit out of luck. Like, what are you supposed to do? And then on the other hand, it's also devaluing boss kills, right? Like you want people to be heavily incentivized to make builds that can kill bosses, preferably deathless, reliably. And I just feel like the bossing endgame in Path of Exile lacks a lot of like really interesting drops. I think Zizaran's opinion always resonates with me a great deal there, where it's like, yeah, the drop pool from Uber Elder is kind of cool. Watcher's Eyes are really nice, and
Well, that's
Cirrus is also
fantastic.
great. But like a lot of things, especially drops that have a divination card that can be farmed elsewhere, but in the boss, are just super unexciting. Like what comes to mind, for example, is Starforge. Other than that, it's a fairly bad sword in today's meta because, like we pointed out earlier, you can make a rare weapon that's probably better. It's also just not really heavily incentivized to farm Shaper for it because you can get it from other sources by just getting the diff cards out of stack decks, out of diff card boxes, and yeah, that's just a thing that I feel going forward needs to be either significantly scaled down or like meaningfully changed to the point where the divination cards are sort of a pity drop. So if you're farming a specific boss and you want a specific unique, that if you don't get the unique, you can still get the drops, you can still get the card set from that boss, but not from other places because that completely bypasses the boss.
Yeah.
This ends up being one of the weird ones where there's multiple problems that are competing because we were just talking about Uber at Ziri loot and like, oh, you get the axe, yay. Now, if we extended this system of, you know what, screw it, uniques drop everywhere, you could get the Atziri axe in a map, and then all of a sudden you would be like, ooh, I just did my first white map. The Atziri axe dropped. Okay, this changes something.
Yep.
Yeah.
By keeping it at Uber Atziri, it sucks. Not keeping it at Uber Atziri, it has a place. Um, you know, at the other point in time, you could do both in theory. All items have a very, very low chance of dropping wherever because aren't we playing an ARPG to kill a mob and then see an item drop and we're like, wait a second, did that just drop? Oh, okay, this changes things. Like, imagine just killing a mob in a map and then seeing a Watcher's Eye. Doesn't mean it has to happen all the time, but you would be like, and that's more interesting than an exalt dropping. It's not necessarily worth more than an exalt, but
Yeah. Depends on
and
what your ID, I guess. Yeah.
exactly.
It
And
could
then
be.
that would be a case where you're actually excited to ID something other than how you're IDing most things. But when you keep it just at a boss, which does help define the boss, the problem is those uniques need to maintain a constant power comparative to the crafting time and then the end game DPS requirements and the build meta, because if not, you get Uber Atziri loot. You get a whole bunch of bosses which uniques were farmable, and then one patch later, it's a waste of your time. Or if there's one item from the boss that you would want, every other item from the boss, even if it had a place, becomes worthless because it gets over farmed for a specific purpose.
Yep.
Yeah, balancing boss loot in general is like a multi-layer problem for sure. I totally agree, and I think there are some bosses I think which have loot that works really well. I think Watcher's Eye is probably it might actually be the best boss drop we have in sense of excitement, but also not when you get the Watcher's Eye, you're not automatically getting a good item, but you're always excited. Like when I see the prismatic jewel on an Elder Ubald, I'm always like, yes, okay, an ID, and then sometimes you're like, oh, should have sold it un-ID'd.
The worst thing about that is just like straight mathematically, it has never been the right move on a trade league to ID them.
To ID them, especially the
always
ones.
sell them. It is on average about 40 to 60% more money depending on the league.
Well, that's
if you just
always
sell them on
that's always going to be the case for an item that has a high variance. Like that's like let's say Venter's Gamble was the meta item that people wanted for whatever reason. Extremely high variance on that one. Un-ID'd would always be more value because the gamble that you save money, you're paying extra for.
Yep.
But that being said, I've never sold one un-ID'd. I can't bring myself to do it.
But that's why it's a great designed item, right? Like if we're being fair, it's a item that you want to see drop. It's an item that you know you should probably sell because you're farming it, and it's an item that you're like, no, I'm IDing it because I want to fucking see it.
Yeah,
so that's a great item.
I mean, I've sold them un-ID'd for a while. That was when I found up a headhunter because at some point I was like, okay, I'm gonna run like I don't know 60 Uber Elders, whatever, like a lot of them, and I'm just gonna sell them un-ID because they go out like for 9x per pop. That's like so much money, and if you're done ID and you're like, okay, 10C, that just feels bad. But I had one guy like buy two and ID them both, and they were both like I think like 20x plus. I think I both had like +2 impales on it and something half useful. I was like, ooh, that hurts. So you can have it both ways, and I think that's cool about it. That's why I think it's probably my favorite boss drop in the game. But there are other boss like Cirrus drop table I think is fantastic. Awaken the Orb is good. Awaken Gems are a lot of good ones. The helmet is a strong item that you can use on your character, and that you can like if you don't have it's common enough that you can farm it in SSF. It's still good enough, and if you ever get a good roll, you can use it. Like you can even sell it for a bit more. Like if you get a perfect roll on the life, whatever.
Yeah, it's also really kind of the new go-to base for enchanting on labyrinths because it's so universally good.
Yeah, exactly. You can enchant it.
Gloves, Cirrus gloves are my favorite.
Yeah. They're like a good gambling item. Like every single loot drop he has is somehow good. Then you have like the Savior, which is like a niche build-wise niche item, but it's like a cool chase item to have because it's actually like cool and strong, and it's also like fancy. It has like it's a gimmicky cool item that's also strong, and it will always have like a fun use case of I just want to copy paste myself. Even if it's not strong, you can still make meme builds with it. Like it's still a cool item. It's an interesting item.
Well, and it should, in theory, always be strong because at least it mirrors your main hand weapon.
Exactly. Unless if your build is good and your main hand weapon is good, then it's can never be completely bad, right?
Mm-hmm. And I agree. It is a well-designed loot table, and that sword is really interesting. That being said, the helm's current power level is admittedly fragile to game balance.
That's true.
Whereas, like, the Watcher's Eye is not fragile to game balance. Unless nobody runs auras all of a sudden.
Yeah. I think I can see like a meta maybe where like Archmage is so good people just don't reserve mana anymore. But that's
then
like
level 1 clarity, level 1 precision, level 1 vitality.
I think Watcher's Eye is like on the ladder is like almost always the most used item. Oh, Thread of Hope, by the way. I'm talking about most used items. That's also such an interesting item that you can like try to squeeze in builds, min max, and divine it in like as never got like one you could divine it, put it in spot.
Thread of Hope is so much better of an item by being a common drop of his. Imagine that was the Etziri X level drop where it's like a 2% off.
Yeah, no.
Like would Thread of Hope like it would be used, it would be more expensive, but would it be as good of an item or make him have such a better boss table if it was rare?
Yeah.
And this is when we talk back where, you know, interesting but not accessible, it doesn't matter that it's interesting.
Yeah. Like, I would definitely still wear one, but I wouldn't be able to put out a build guide with them in if they were that kind of rare.
It's kind of like cluster tools, right?
You don't got a 19x Thread of Hope in the build.
I've seen a lot of Bottled Faith build guides. I'm just saying. It's not stopping other people.
It's some people are not stopping. Same with like, you just need these 2 cluster setups, and then you can like start the build. I love that. That part is the best.
And you just get voices, a Bottled Faith, and
That's easy. Don't even need a headhunter at that point. Really
Yeah.
good.
No headhunter build.
Yeah. So the thing is, when they released Cirrus, I was like, yes, finally I actually got like boss drops right. That's so cool. And I was so excited for Maven's drop pool at that point. Like when they released the next big, I was like, okay, if they get this anywhere near
What
like
happened?
Cirrus's drop pool, and then they announced the Maven orb, right? That's the only drop we knew beforehand would
Yep.
come from Maven. I was like, yo, that's like kind of like the Awaken orb. That's going to be amazing. I wonder what all the other cool stuff is. Turns out the Maven orb is
Nope.
the cool stuff.
It's just the Maven orb. That's all you care about.
Not
That's
even the
it.
elevated sextants. It's just the Maven orb.
The elevated sextants were very pog last
Yeah.
league.
Yeah. Yeah.
Practically useless now.
I mean, you would have to buy them for like all 3 maps.
Um,
I've never
Haven't
seen
even
an
done
elevated
it.
sextant drop.
I got-
I've done like 15 Mavens or so on permanent.
I haven't done the Maven fight.
You
you
should.
know
Weird.
what? If you've only been in those no lube leagues, I'm not shocked.
Well,
I
the
don't think I could get there.
The Ritual League I did play in the softcore trade, and I was doing juiced up rogue exiles. But
Yeah.
like I was like going through the Maven tier, I was like, okay, upgrading the maps and doing the boss fights. I'm like, okay, I like this progression more than the progression for the Awakener bosses. I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
And then I got to like the 10 fights and then how to start the Maven unlock, and I'm like, yeah, fuck this grind. Like this no. I'm bored. I'm just gonna buy these little watchstones. And I'm going to be surprised if this boss fight is so amazing that I need to experience it. I just want to fight rogue metamorphs because they're hilarious. That's what I did.
Rogue Metamorphs are hilarious. Yeah, I really like them, yeah. Yeah, actually, if it didn't feel like that last league I was actually like, because the system was so new as well, I was just like, excited to like experience it, see like how far I would go with the 10 boss fights, see like what fighting all the guardians in one fight would be like, all the breach lords and stuff. But this league, I'm already like, that's a lot of stuff to get through until I can farm like the high content. And I've not even been like this. It was so disheartening for me, like that part. Plus, that I don't really enjoy the league mechanic as much. I've not even fought serious this league. I've like just been taking it on a back burner in SSF, like super chill farming, like tier 12 maps, because it's just so much to do now until you get to the point where you're like, okay, now I can like have some craftable watchstones. I can actually have my passes for the Atlas, can actually like go into cool farming strategies and stuff. There's like this huge thing you have to like level and progress through before you get to the actual interesting and customizable farming experience that we have.
That's interesting because the fact that it is that long is like the only saving grace of the entire league for me. Like that's the bit that I love.
I mean, it
Is
makes
that
sense with your
I've got
playtime
that
and your
much
progression
progression.
rate. It makes a lot of sense that you have like more progression. That's I think you are basically the person that this is aimed at, like prolonging the end game, having more stuff to like, and on the back end to farm.
Which is good because I won't touch on it too much, but I mean they did remove like the top 70% of the game difficulty this league.
Yeah.
Like it's game difficulty that like 0.0001% of people ever saw, but the game is now 30% as difficult at a maximum top min-max level. It is now 30% as difficult as it was and has been for the last 2 leagues. So if I didn't have any progression in my map tiering either, my whole league could be over in 4 days. It's got a very Diablo 3 sort of feel right now, where like I really enjoy it, and then like after a few days, I'm like, oh, I've done everything. The whole game's finished. And that's, I don't know if I love that.
One that is an aspect where I find GG often has the difficulty where, okay, like, yes, they want to engage players as long as they can because player retention. However, they have this bad habit of carrot on a sticking, where like the crafted watchstone system, like I think is absolutely fantastic. It's a really magnificently interesting system that allows you to further invest to increase the rate in which the thing that you want to farm yields more. It might not necessarily be the optimal thing, but I want to do X. I want to then invest so that X is worth more my time, my Atlas feels different than everybody else's Atlas, and I've invested into my Atlas. Like, that's a good feeling. But the amount of time and currency before that even starts. Like, why can't you do that with the first Watchstones that you get, and then do something where it's like, yeah, at the super end, that's where you can start seeing the mods that really blow up the currency or make 100% delirium maps drop. Because, with the carrot on the stick, you can still reward the hyper top end that is basically a percentage of players that is so insignificant that financially it makes no sense to offer something to them outside of PR reasons. However, which is the
That's
demographic
definitely
you're talking
true.
about. And that's fine. Like, I like decisions that are going to cater to a whole bunch of difference. But then why does that entire system of crafting, like when I was looking at like, oh, this rogue metamorph in Valdo's last time, because it was Valdo's, it's like, oh, or not rogue metamorphs, but just like the double metamorphs. How much did the Watchstone cost? Like 2 exalt base. So let's say I'm a casual player. I want to play around with this new mechanic that is there. I have to invest like 8 chaos before I start alterating crafting, which is 3 alterations to a chaos. Once again, as a casual player, that's a lot. That is an incredible amount for, even just trying the league mechanic that is new and seeing the new system. Not even getting returns from the new system, experiencing it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And also the Watchstones only start dropping, like, I wish they would just commonly also drop maybe from, like, the 3 boss thing already. Maybe that would be kind of cool, because then I would have maybe some already, but I find it weird that they only drop so late as well. Like, it makes sense because they are supposed to be, like, a min-maxing thing and stuff. But I think what the Conquerors, for example, did well in the Elder system, that there was, like, some taste of the new system to experience, and also of the new rewards early on. Like, if you can kill an early Conqueror, you can get an Awaken gem, right? It's rare. You can get an Awakener, like a Conqueror Exalt. That's cool. Like, there's always the chance. But for Maven, it's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna grind through, like, these invitations till I can get to the part that actually, like, gives me anything useful other than, like, even, like, getting, like, the first passives. Usually you want, like, 2 or 3 passives to, like, get some synergy going and actually have, like, a region where you're like, okay, now it's worth putting my John missions in here, or now it's worth to, like, run my blinded maps or whatever here, my blind scarabs, stuff like that. So yeah, it ramps up a bit too slowly, I feel. I think that's the main issue I have with that as well.
Yeah, people have been talking about how this league, it feels really hard to get stuff going. Like, there's just so much that you need to set up in order to actually enjoy your mapping experience and to feel like you're getting something out of it. Especially if you contrast it with the experience that we had last league. I personally like it a little bit more to have, like, empty maps and kind of a little bit of difficulty to get sustain going, because that's only there for the first week at max, right? Like the first handful of days, and then for the rest of the league, map sustain is a non-issue usually. But talking about well, yeah, I mean, depending on what you're doing, you're dying 10 times in the first 2 weeks, like I sometimes do, then you have a little bit more fun with not sustaining maps for a while. But talking about the endgame system with the Maven, I think the invitations being like RNG drops for the 10 boss invitations just feels silly. Like, I know that the first one is guaranteed now when you do it, but it's just beyond that. Even if I don't get there very early, but I've done the grinding last league in softcore to get some practice on Maven, and it just feels incredibly silly to sit on 10 bosses and to not have the invitation for a specific region, and then keep dropping invitations, but you drop them for another region. Because they can drop anywhere, they're not even specific to the region. You can get the 10
then
invitation.
You can trade. You gotta enjoy the trade system.
Player
Without
interaction.
And
True.
you wouldn't trade. It's simple.
Player gotta show off the MTX.
I mean, it really does feel like something Maven should just hand you the thing, like we get Conqueror maps now.
Yeah.
Like, it should just be a thing. We're like, hey,
But
I've got 10 bosses.
Well, I think it's fine if it's a grind, right? But then this hooks into the other problem of there not being really any big rewarding, like, chase outcomes for the Maven fight. Like, Maven's Orb was pretty valuable last league, and it would, if you're lucky, would make up.
Disgustingly more valuable this league.
Yeah,
you know
It's disgustingly more valuable? Well,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
but like economically speaking, it's only like 2x now
Yeah.
on softcore trade. Whereas last
love
league it
that.
was like 6x or so. It's just
Yeah.
because this is because less
that orb should
people.
be like 12x, by the way.
I'm
I
actually
don't know.
surprised that I'm like not playing trades. I don't know, but I was expecting it to
Yeah.
be at least as expensive, if not more, this league. Because
But
what?
didn't you hear? Reddit said it was going to be worthless because they nerfed harvest, so no
Ah,
one's going
true.
to be able to use it.
All right,
Except
right.
that it's still really, really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's like on the top end, it's good, but there are people who use it for the top end, so there should be like if the price went up, people would still buy it. So I'm surprised.
Well, it's the
2x seems
it's
too
the
low.
avenue to the best items in the game, so it
Mhm.
should be ridiculously expensive.
And it's really, really easy to get Tailwind, Elusive, Onslaught, Life, Movement Speed, and elevate any two of those you like on a pair of boots. It's actually relatively easy to do that still.
You do, yeah, with the meta mods.
You
But-
just got to use meta mods and the chaos orb, the veiled chaos orbs, and two an awakener orb, and two of the maven orbs, and I mean two if you hit them both first time. But like you're using a whole bunch of those processes, but those are still really good, and you can still make those boots with like tailwind, onslaught, elusive, movement speed, and life. And you can still do it over and over again. Like you can just pump out boots like that and sell them to people. I don't know why no one's crafting.
Well,
I don't know why
and
they're still so cheap.
this
Harvest did.
this is one of the ones that it's really interesting when the crafting mechanics reward you for understanding the knowledge of the systems, right? It's not, slam and exalt and pray. Because it's like, okay, if you pay attention to the things that you can do, there's a whole bunch of ways to manipulate so that you can get something really strong out of it. And that's rewarding because it's like, I spent time to learn the game. I've invested. I can get these results. Awesome. Right? But for the vast majority of players, they're stuck at either because it takes a lot of base currency to start to be able to do that. So most players are stuck at, I have a Chaos Orb, and I got fucked. I used it. It was a mistake. But one of the other things I think that's often a problem when we talk about player information and economy is the more people who know how to do something, then something will, like, if something became standard knowledge where it's like I can invest 2 exalts for these boots to guarantee the results, I'm selling them for 5 exalts. Once everyone knows, well, they're going to sell for 2 exalts because that's the base cost. It was the same thing with the +3 weapons when that was the meta a long time ago for SRS. Once people knew how to do it, it just went down to the base cost. And the economy of PoE, you make currency by not telling people what you're doing. You don't make currency by telling people what you're doing because you've just thrown that avenue out the window when you're talking about like a craft economy.
Yeah. It's also why making guides for that is always so weird. It's like, can you make a guide on how to make currency? Yep. You make a video, goes really popular, goes really viral about like 3 methods to make currency, and none of them work anymore.
Yeah, but six hours later, and their market's dry.
Yep.
We actually because I start with a team now in softcore, but we don't operate as a team, right? Like we're not interested in doing the whole like we've got 5 supports and a cull carry and a quantity dude, and like that's not. We are a team of 5 people, but we specifically sent me when we were deciding to do this league. We specifically set me up as the bosser to be doing like Shaper and Elder and stuff on like it was going to be the end of day 1, but it ended up being the end of day 2 because day 1 was a shit show. But we specifically went with that, even though I would have been better off being one of the mappers, because as soon as we find a mapping strategy that's going to make us a lot of money, if I do it on stream, it's over like that. Like it's over like that because anyone can just go mapping. And if we've got builds that we're planning that by day 4 are going to be worth 120x, but we need 15x on day 1 to make it, we need to be able to make that like right now. That's the plan, right? To get in front of the market. And so I can't do any of the mapping stuff.
And bossing is
why-
kind of safe because theoretically
Yeah.
anyone can make a build that can kill bosses early, but
Yep.
you will have to be able to make a build that can kill bosses early, and you have to have the
That's why
currency.
you send me bossing because there's no secret here.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I'm farming double Shaper Guardians and
Yeah.
double Elder Guardians 18 hours into the league.
I'm buying
then
boss
killing those
content and killing
bosses.
the bosses on my build
Yeah.
that can do that very well. Cool.
Like there's no
Sec-
secret here. Like,
And I might be even been investing into the passives that make this better, but that's not a secret.
Yep.
It's like,
That-
yeah,
That also, though, ends up leaning into that weird thing where when you talk about the comparison from the top end and the lower end, it's like, yeah, you can make an incredible amount of currency in the first couple days. Like garbage sells. You
disgusting.
just throw into a quad tab, say 6 chaos, 10 chaos, whatever your minimum worth your time to trade is, and people are buying garbage because it is day one, it is day two. And when you talk about like progressing to these late game systems or getting the DPS to overcome Maven if you're trying to play something that isn't meta, because we all know the builds that kind of get the DPS that's just required, doesn't matter. But as soon as you lose that, let's say, first week of economy, all of a sudden these items are not the same amount of time to get to. Now, like if you start playing a week into the league, it is not just a little bit more time to get to that end game, to get the gear of the end game. It is exponential, and you're always fighting the inflation of the economy. And when you have the systems designed that way to be so late, like it's great to have a system for a hyper end game player. It helps longevity. It shows great moments where it's like, okay, I've put a lot of money into this build. Fuck me up. But when the core system is unlocked so late, you can get there fast, but every day that you delay it, it takes that much longer to unlock the systems and start to engage with the new content. And what's engaging in white and yellow maps? Like everything that keeps getting added is like, oh, it doesn't start spawning till tier 14, or then it doesn't start spawning until the Maven, or it doesn't start spawning to Awakener 8. And it's just this huge period of time that is dead space to experienced players, and it's a huge period of time that like you have to be going fast, or it takes a lot to economically move through it. And then when people are talking about being burnt out, it's just like put the systems early, like let people engage with the systems and then tier the rewards along the way. Like imagine life rolls or on gear didn't start dropping until eye level 84, and it's just like, yeah, you keep dying until you get the 84 bases, but that's what they're doing with the new systems. It's like this mod that defines your build that will carry you only drops at the very end game, so hope other people are playing meta or do something like you can't organically dick around. And it costs so much money to try something. Like build, everyone knows the most content that's consumed is build guides. Look at any like events, look at any prize pools, no matter how big it is, it's gonna get less views than, you know, build guide that's done horribly. Very misleading. But it had the right skill that everyone's interested in right now.
Yeah. It's like
20
million Shaper DPS for 5 chaos. Bam, 100. It's just
it doesn't
that.
even have to be true.
Yeah.
No. I started looking at some of these build guides because I was like, you invited me on podcast. I'm like, I haven't really consumed content, so let's see what's around. And I'm looking at these build guides. I'm like, you lying sacks of shit.
Yeah, I love the ones that are like, yep, 10 million damage, going to cost 5x, and then you look and you're like, that is a 72x helmet. What the fuck are you talking about?
And at the same time, if you're making like trying to make honest, realistic build guides with like that give people proper expectations, you'll get stuff like, yo, this is shit. The other builds are way better. I'm like, no, they're not. They're
This
just
only
saying
does
they're
3
better.
million DPS. Yes, but mine actually does 3 million DPS.
Yeah.
Not.
The boss is not shocked for 50%. I don't have like stuff tick that I barely can keep up. What is this?
So it was mentioned in chat, and then that reminded me. This is also something I think build guides have been being done wrong for years now. I think there's the most important question involved in build guide making. No content creator is asked. No one is asking. And the question everyone needs to be asking themselves and then of the guides they're watching is, how long does it take me to get to tier 15 and 16 maps? at least when it comes to a trade league,
Yep.
because that really, really changes what league start build guide you can go with, right? Because if you're going to start, like, let's say last league as a low life carrion golem necromancer, you had better be a day one player. Because I started as it, I was a day one player, and it's fantastic. And I had all my jewels by the end of the day. And all of those jewels were worth 9 times as much by the end of the following day, and then 115 times as much by 3 days in. You could not buy them. So if you were like a day 5 player, you better not start that build, because you're not buying the pieces that you need for that build to function.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
You
that's
just
really
not.
important.
And no one asks that. But there are other builds that work the other way, right?
Mhm.
So Dominating Blow is one of my biggest build guides.
That's what I'm playing in
And
no
it
loop.
is yeah,
Yeah,
and it is
just started? Nice.
trashed here as a trade league day one player. It's horrible because the gear that I need to do those maps doesn't drop until way after it. Like I need a claw from Chimera to
Yeah.
be able to do red maps.
Not anymore. It's not Chimera anymore.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
okay. But
it's
at that
prey.
point,
Hey, it's
Right?
buffed.
yeah. But at that point, like, I need that claw to be even
Yeah.
able to do red maps comfortably. And there are none on day one. So for a day one player, it's trash. But if you're a day 3 player, it takes you 3 days to get to late red maps or 5 days to get to late red maps. That's a 10C or 2C claw you can pick
Yeah.
up for nothing. So it's fantastic for them, but garbage for a day one player. Right. And so I think that's actually super important. And that, like, literally all league start build guide people need to start thinking
Yeah.
about that and explaining what kind of speed this build is appropriate for.
Because I like upsetting people,
Yep.
most guides are shit. And it's not.
Agreed.
You need to cater to a target audience. And when you're talking about a guide, like, okay, if I need a guide, I don't know something. I don't know what I don't know. I don't have the information to know what a guide is good. I could be like, oh, general rule of thumb, you see bottled faith, fuck off, right? Sure. But it's very easy to it's very easy to hide what gear is being used on a build. I've noticed a trend in some of the build guides I saw where they'd like clear through a map, and I noticed a lot of map mods not being shown, probably because they're white maps. Second thing, I see cuts before bosses, and I'm just like, interesting. And you can do the things of, like, there's ways to both display a video to be of misleading power, but regardless, the consumer who needs a build guide doesn't know. You could be like, oh, it's like a day one, and I can do it this. But for a new player, for someone who is like, oh, okay, but I am playing day one, they don't know what the difference between that day one and the day 5 is, right? So then is your build guide going to explain the very important difference between what a day 1 and a day 5 player is? And then it's just like, are you going to clear a map at the rate that I do, where I'm just like dicking around like do, right? Is this person maintaining flasks up all the time? And getting all those details is important for the person who needs a build guide. Ton of us, when you're experienced, it's just like, oh, I haven't played this in a while. Is there like someone playing it in a league just so I can get a quick look at what they have? And
Yeah, like, I just want to path a building.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's
You
it.
just want to path a building. Let's look at a boss. Okay, it didn't die in 5 minutes, so that, like, this is workable.
Yeah. It's
but
basically
then-
like what you just need, like, a reference point, right? You just need what baseline gear does he have, and what, like, does he get out of it, and then am I good with that or not? And then you can, like, kind of like extrapolate your progression basically.
Like, I'm in a habit now of looking at just like heat maps on PoE Ninja. Just being like, right,
Passive tree
what's
heat maps, yeah.
everybody just in general doing with the passive tree? Just show me a heat map of, like, roughly where people are. I'm like, yeah, all right, I can work with that. And then that's it, I'm off.
Yep.
Yeah, and heat maps are great when you know the tools, but
Yeah.
for, like, when we see, because the best you can get for videos is beginner guide, day one, all this stuff, but they're just turning more and more into SEO garbage, where it's just some content farm that's trying to, or someone who is jumping into YouTube who is like doesn't have that target audience, but you have to clickbait titles. So it's beginner, day one, no currency, on a budget, all the titles all the time. And that is just more noise for people trying to get in the game, because you go onto the wiki, it's like, okay, or what information source is the relevant one to what you're trying to do, and then having to know when it's wrong. Like, when is the wiki the better source to use than PoEDB, or when is the PoEDB showing you actually like the enemy monster debuff, not necessarily the buff of the skill that you're trying to use, because that can be weird with like cruelty when you look that one up, and it becomes odd.
I think this ties very much into what Yoji was talking earlier. What one of the big reasons for him quitting content creation was, and also a big point that Somat brought up, is that the real successful PoE content is not necessarily the content that explains PoE well or like has valuable information, but just the content that is marketed well. Content with the clickbaity thumbs, the content with the clickbaity DPS values. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about the whole Somat thing. But before we get into that, I quickly wanted to say that in general for new players, it's like really hard to get an idea of what PoE is like at a higher level. A lot of people underestimate the power of your flask setup, for example. Like, people don't really understand how powerful it is to have flasks up permanently and to have the right types of flasks. Like, I see a lot of people when I do build help running with 2 life flasks, 1 mana flask, and maybe a Stibnite and not even a Quicksilver or something like that. And that obviously is a lot weaker than using the right flasks, especially on a crit build, for example. The crit flask, the diamond flask, is like, it's so valuable. Like, it's half of your damage, basically, if not more. And in the same way, I think it's really hard for a new player when you're like at level 30, 40, 50, and you're struggling. And it's really hard to extrapolate to have an idea of how it feels at endgame, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm level 30 and that guy is like playing SSF HC and he's level 90. The game must be so much harder at that point. But it isn't, because the game actually gets easier the further you progress and the better you get at it and the higher you gear your character. It actually becomes more and more trivial towards the end. And that's something that has been bothering me to some degree in Path of Exile. Like, I don't mind that there is a plateau, but it's everything is about reaching that plateau. And a lot of the most engaging content and most challenging content is not at the end, because by the time you get there, you outgear it so heavily. Do you think that there should be, I mean, that's probably a loaded question, but I think everyone agrees that there should be some content at the highest tier that is the hardest content, even with all the gear that you have?
I
mean, there is.
That was the delirious stuff that got removed, kind of, right?
There was, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, when I saw that, like, a little splitting and stuff got fixed, my initial reaction was like, oh yeah, PogChamp, that was bullshit. And that was a lot of bullshit stuff with the splitting and duping. I think the worst was actually the heist blueprint thing. I mean, that was definitely not a good thing to have in the game. And maybe like with the sextants and stuff, but they definitely removed like some really high end top end endgame, as Balor said, that not many, like, by not any measure, like a lot of people played. That was like very few people, but I think it was still good to have something for these people. And maybe instead of removing it fully, they could have done something else to it. But it's really hard, because it was, of course, absurdly rewarding. But as PT said, at that point, but once you get to the point where you are at that point, currency doesn't matter that much anymore. Like, these are the people who will get absurdly rich no matter what you do.
So, something I should mention about that, because I go on about it like I'm one of those people who are doing that content. I haven't been able to make it to that content. I'm not actually part of that group. I've been getting significant, but I've been getting significantly better each league, doing lots of practice, lots and lots of group practices, like getting 5 people together several times a week and doing like runs through the axe and restart and getting faster and like getting better at progression and getting better at everything. And that's been like a driving force for like 4 or 5 leagues. And then this league was the first league where we were all pretty confident we were going to make it there. Like, we were so far in front. It was so quick compared to how we had been, that we were like, we can do this. We're we are in this area where we can get there now. And then they're like, boop, gone. And I'm like, oh, but that's been my goal for like 9 months now. And now the stuff that's left is stuff that I was always able to do by like day 2. And that's the hardest content that's left. I'm like, what happened to my goal? The thing I was chasing is gone. And that's pretty feels bad.
When we're talking about the difficulty, especially at what gets taken out, adds in things that used to be difficult that are now trivial, that certain people never got to experience it being that difficult. Because it's, once something gets buffed, you don't get that difficulty that it used to be, depending on the context. Like one of the key things is that you run into, if we're talking about softcore trade, is GGG has yet to figure out what the fuck they want to do about party play. I think that's a fair statement that they've done fuck all. This league actually has a mechanic that you can abuse with party play, so yay. But like, the balance of party play versus the balance of solo is a disparity beyond comprehension when we talk about like balance. Balance is going out the window. There's no conversation. It's like, oh, this is a party play challenge, but you can't do it solo. Like, not possible. There is no gear level that is overcoming this hurdle. There's no amount of mirrors or currency that is getting you up that hill. And then the second thing, when you talk about the challenge in the context where Catmaster OP is like, it's not hard enough. Well, ARPGs have a really weird position because it's not a very tactical game. ARPGs aren't high skill based games. They're more of knowledge checks. For the most part, when do you craft? When do you spend your currency to get the most out of? When do you switch mapping tiers? How do you it's more knowledge and then simple processes that you don't try not to fuck up in hardcore because you can die. But that means that in an endgame context, when your build is together, you're essentially in a win state. If your flasks are up, your buffs are, you've made your build, we're assuming it's a good build, you should be able to not die because you know the challenges that are coming to you, you know the stat blocks, and you're like, this is the most amount of damage, only these things can kill me, so your build is in a win state. And what are you going to do? Give a boss a ton more health? That's what they did last time. It's just like, oh, good. Now, instead of taking 10 seconds to kill this boss to get this loot that can't kill me, it takes 50 seconds. Fun. And when you have those two things, you have to fix one of those two problems first before you can even start to manage a difficulty.
So, interestingly, that's something Diablo 3 does better than PoE, which is like one of the very few things that it does better, which is party play. Party play feels great in that game, and it does not really put you very far in front. Like, they're a little tiny bit further in front in party play in the ladders, but not by enough to, like, if you didn't like partying with people, you wouldn't be like, oh, suddenly I'm at a huge disadvantage, like 10 rifts behind or something. I don't know, but like, they do party play really, really well. And that's just, now that I've been playing that every season, I now play that for like a week. Just whenever it comes out, I play like 3 to 5 days of it or whatever until it gets old. But now that I've been doing that and I've realized party play is really fun, it's made me want to do actual party play in PoE. And I'm like,
not just like playing with a party, but like together actually.
Yeah, like actually in the same map party play. And like, I have a group to start with, but none of us want to play supports. Like, what? I'll just put on 19 auras and chase somebody around. Oh, fun. Like, I don't want to do that.
But it's OP.
Well, the thing is, like, some of my best memories, especially old PoE, is party play. And it's such a weird thing to describe to the current game, which would just be better to have an offline mode. I remember doing like Team Discharge. This would have been Talisman League, I think. And we're just like, okay. This was back when maintaining charges was hard. That was the balance because Discharge was so strong. So it was like, okay, everyone get Conduit. You cast Frenzy. You Enduring Cry. You everyone was generating a charge.
Yeah.
And the epilepsy that fucking happened when we started going through maps was just the worst. And then we all died because we were greedy and we didn't use Voltaxic and there was Reflect, so we were all playing a ticking time bomb where we just instantly died. But the point was, there was a reason, like, when it was slow, you could stay together, you could play as a party, but at the current movement speed, it's like, yeah, it's just like, okay, everyone run through the map as fast as you can, stay kind of close to the aura, and everything should die, and everyone else is just looting. So one person is doing damage, everyone else is just looting, and it's just like, boom, map, clear, portal, next.
Yep. And if you try to not do that, like if you try and every extra person basically just has to be a support if you want to play in the same. And if you're not, it becomes who's got the fastest movement speed. And whoever's got the fastest movement speed, they get to kill everything. And the other person just runs around doing nothing and being completely useless.
Yeah.
Like that's just how party play is right now. That's You're either a dedicated party, you play support, your role is really only just being in the vicinity, but at least you're doing a thing. Your existence there matters. But if you don't do a dedicated party, you're just nothing. If you're the slowest, if you're not the fastest, you're just a run around and pick up loot guy.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing.
And that's always been the game, even when you did like master rotations back in the day. There was like one guy who was the fastest of the party, and everyone just runs behind that person.
Yeah. Yep. And he would be the guy who kills the Varichi target when the mission is to protect it.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of those mission designs, like I'll often be like, I prefer the old PoE, but
not that.
There was some wonderfully shit designs in old PoE.
Yeah, the Varichis. Also the escort the minions to the totem pole. That was so fun.
My favorite was dual vegan. It's like, oh, you gotta fight vegan for your daily. Okay, dual vegan. I'm dead. Why am I dead?
Yeah, there were basically two scenarios. There was dual vegan for your daily, fight, boom, one, or fight, one shot. That was the two scenarios that had. The other ones were... Oh, there was
also
kill the puppet
vegan and keep him below 30% health for 8 seconds without fucking killing him.
Oh, that would be
that
fight,
was the exile.
Boom, failed.
Oh, was it the exile? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
and you could get the regen exile with that.
Yeah. And then you had to figure out how to balance your damage when you do not enough on a 1-link, but you're going to kill him on a 2-link. And I remember sitting there with like spells hitting them and being like, right, 1, 2, 3, take out my second link. 1, 2, 3, put my link back in. 1, 2, 3, take out my link. 1, 2, time's up. Yes, win.
But I will say, like, you remember that and you put more thought into that than you probably do Cirrus now.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, but I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do it again.
I admit that you put more thought into that than I ever did, because I just accepted that these missions were like a failure mission, and I'm good with that. Unless I, like, for some reason accidentally leave the target at low life, then I just like run away and hope that it stays.
Doing any of those missions as a minion build.
I played a lot of Summoner back then as well, so that did not help. But playing Spectre Summoner back then was like a very different thing. Oh, I logged out. Well, get back to yellow maps.
Oh man.
Does anyone want to open a zone for me and kill some of mobs? Because I'm gonna die if I go in the map.
I mean, I think we can all agree there's some things in old PoE that were definitely horribly worse than what we have now.
Yep. Yeah, there was. There's been quite a lot of really good improvements as well.
Yeah,
but I think it's really easy to overlook them.
Sorry. Yeah, but at the same point in time, I think when I often get into the guy, oh, weren't you fine with like X? It's just like, are you gonna accept a quality of life improvement if it comes with taking away the aspect of the game you want? So let's say, you enjoyed the 100% deliriums. That's what you want back in the game. What quality of life would you trade for losing the top end difficulty that you strive for? Right? Because
I'd trade not having to pick up the currency off the floor. My hands hurt.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there has been plenty of things that have come in since, like the height for me, that I'm like, yeah, these are great features. But that's not like, oh, I regret what I said. It's just like, no, I would like the game that I liked in its format also being less shit. Like, I currently continuously look for any other ARPG to hold my attention because Path of Exile is not trying to cater towards me. And that's fine. It just, what I've got in its place is Vulcan, and that's not fine, so what am I supposed to do?
Last Epoch, as soon as it gets its multiplayer, ooh, I'm gonna be all over that. I've
We're
already
gonna
played
open,
like 400
we're gonna
500
open that
hours.
one because PT has an interesting take on that one
I
as
don't
well.
I don't like Last Epoch. It's
You don't like it?
no.
I was so surprised.
Oh,
Yeah, I was also a bit surprised.
It's
I've
just
done like 400 or 500
boring.
hours.
It just doesn't do anything different. And just stand and right click and it's like it's an ARPG, but it doesn't push any envelopes. And everyone's like, "Oh, the crafting system." I'm like, "Oh, the crafting system that every Korean MMO has used for 10 years? Cool. Thanks."
That is actually true. That is actually true. It's definitely the same, like basically the same crafting system that I've used in freaking Maple Story back in the day. So there's some truth to that. It's this, but it's I think that this actually is a crafting system that can work really well in ARPGs, especially with the top end drop only mods that they introduced. I think that combination is a good starting point, but I don't think the current crafting system is there yet to engage me for like a long time.
The mod complication doesn't exist to engage the crafting system of being like, "Oh, I want to risk this item for this mod set." Instead, it's like, "Okay, I have the prefixes I want, I have the suffixes that I want. So now to get an upgrade, I grind for the base with the tier 1 that you can't craft, or it's
Yep.
tier 6 in that game. Okay, and then I can absolutely say it's a 5% chance I get the upgrade, and I didn't get the upgrade. Okay, so like there is one exact path with one exact percentage chance, and it's like, okay, you got the upgrade. All right, what's the next upgrade to get your DPS 5% higher? Well, now it's a 1% chance of upgrade of getting the exact same process, and it's just and yeah, the crafting system as a base is fine, and a lot of the things where it's like, yeah, the system is fine. They have some really interesting takes on stats too,
Yeah.
but they don't do anything interesting with those stats. I'm just like, I have this tree for each skill. Do I want to convert my damage to fire or cold? Fascinating.
Yeah. And there are definitely some skill trees that are better than others. There are some where I'm like, look at them and I'm like, kind of bored. I, for example, really like that some skills can be played in like very different ways, and that you can like add some, for example, add projectiles to your non-projectile skill and scale like completely different type of build, or you can use a skill as a main skill, but you can also convert it to like a utility thing in a different build and have like completely different use. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there, but there are also the trees like skeletons. All right, so you have a skeleton skill and you can spec them into melee, ranged, or magic or whatever. Like it's basically like having 3 skill gems in PoE. It's like, okay, yeah, you have skill trees, but it's actually like 3 different skills that depending on which path you take, there's not that much choice. And I think those are the more boring trees, but there are some fun ones as well. And I feel like the stuff they added recently is way better than the stuff that's already been in the game longer, which
I would agree with that too.
is a good
The
sign.
most
Like the
recent
rogue
stuff has
stuff,
been
for
a lot.
example. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rogue stuff is more interesting, for example, than like some of the primalist stuff that's super basic. But there's also some cool primalist stuff.
I would assume that over time, as the game goes on, they build up upon these very basic systems and make more, or at least I would hope they would add more interesting interactions.
But I think that's the thing to me would be a new game is coming out. It's not competing with PoE 1.0. It's not competing with Diablo 2. It's competing with all of the flavor in Grim Dawn. It's competing with just the quality of combat and the precise engine of D3 and D4 coming out. It's competing with the hype of PoE 2 and the customization of PoE, right? So what is the market? And I can see a very casual market because it like the crafting system is really good for getting a baseline of gear. The skill system and the stat scaling is very hard to like truly fuck up your tree. But for the hype that it has from the people that have been giving it hype, I'm like, you guys want a beginner ARPG? Like this doesn't seem something to sink teeth into and there's always the it could be good, and yeah, PoE 2 can cure cancer. Who knows? Like I don't care what it is going to be. What is it now? Like, and is its selling point really enough? Because like PoE beta, like when PoE was in beta, there was no ARPG with an endless endgame
Yeah.
system that I can think
Mhm.
of. While it was in beta in various forms, it created that. There was no ARPG with a crafting system or taking out gold and making the currency into the crafting system. No ARPG that did that at the time. There was no ARPGs that had the official races and the things that were set up that technically there's none now, but community stuff. Um, they're not doing that either. Like there was no ARPG that did alternate art. There was no ARPG that really understood like not just the rarity of a specific item, but like there was no ARPG with like complicated stat interactions. These were all in PoE beta. PoE beta was like we're trying stuff. Last Epoch beta is it's an ARPG that you've played before. Hey. And that's my problem with it.
I think I'm like hopefully looking into the future rather than looking at it as a product right this second. And I think that's what gets me
But if you're
excited. But it
assuming
also
it's going
does
to be a good product, of course you think.
it also does set me up for
Yeah.
the possibility of massive disappointment.
I think that's
'Cause,
definitely
like,
is an issue. Like if
I see good things able to be done, and I'm really excited thinking they will, and that it
And
will
I
be
hope you're
good.
right. I do hope you're right.
I think I mean I'm having fun with the game as it is right now, but as kind of like a side thing to play when like doing PoE downtime, right? Like trying a new build in Last Epoch every I don't know like 3 months is super fun. I'm having a ton of fun with that. I played like a freaking Void Bonk Slam kind of Sentinel that was fun. I played a Blade Dancer Rogue that was super fun, and I don't know what I'm playing next, but it's probably going to be fun as well. But the content is like as mentioned very limited, and there's not that much absolutely unique in the game. Yeah, it's very inspired by what currently exists, more so than PvP was definitely like inspired by Diablo 2, obviously, but it tried enough new things to be very unique in certain aspects. And I actually in a lot of aspects, the more you think about it, like the passive tree was very new, the currency system was very new. That was like lots of like how the classes were approached and so on. There was lots of new systems, and Last Epoch doesn't have that many new systems. It has some new takes on a few systems, but I agree that there's a lot of potential there. Yeah, the gem socket system that was very new as well.
I'm trying to
Right.
think, like, when was the last time that PoE actually? Because I think, like, the socketable mini passive trees with cluster jewels was also super innovative. Like, maybe the way that it is currently in the game, it could see some adjustments to be a more interesting and more engaging system. But just the basic principle of a socketable passive tree to begin with, like socketable little nodes, I thought jewels were already, like, genius. And then cluster jewels definitely stepped that up a little bit.
I remember seeing cluster jewels and actually like still in full PT cynical mode being like this is probably one of the best things they've ever implemented in the game. And one of the reasons I said that was because the eye level, the keystones didn't depend on the eye level when they were introduced, which meant they didn't gate the interesting mods on really high tiers. Guess what they did next patch?
To
They
be fair,
fucked it.
that's to varying degree. That's not true for
Yeah.
every single jewel.
No, but the
Just
point
the
is
ones you
there was
want.
none
Just
originally.
the ones you want. Yeah.
Just the ones you want.
Yeah.
The bad ones you can grow on any jewel, but the ones you actually want, yeah, those are.
And they're not like most of them aren't too bad to be completely
Yeah.
fair. But
It's like
it was
75-ish, right?
Yeah, 75 is almost everything.
but it's the thing where something was interesting and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is interesting." Everybody's engaging with it and GG was like, everybody's using that. Let's no." And it's just like, who's fucking designing this? Like, yes, everyone was using that. We were engaged with the shit you gave us. Was it strong? Sure, but you also gave enemies a ton of health, so it's like, oh no, people were thinking and spending currency on jewels to make their build better. Fuck that. Get rid of that noise. Talismans being usable? Fuck no.
Yeah, can't have
They
rare
did-
items and builds that are actually
They
like,
did
picked up from
talismans
the
so
ground.
dirty this league. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
I was excited to look at talismans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For,
no, not anymore.
for one whole
They
league,
could've
I actually
gotten
had
rid of
fun
the
picking
anoint.
them up.
They could have just gotten rid of the anoint because now they've given us a way to anoint them, and they could have
Yeah.
just left them being useful.
Then
And that would have been-
weird corrupted oil would probably actually be worth something as well. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect with like I think they think that the talisman implicits are still super powerful in nowadays context, and they just aren't. They're not significantly better than a regular amulet most times.
And the
And
good
them
ones
up.
are still insanely rare.
yeah,
Why?
Another good example of that though is like I found a synthesized gold ring earlier with like increased chaos damage implicit. Well, guess what? It rolls up to like 14%. So the new base, the iodide ring, is 10 times better because it rolls up to 23% increased chaos damage.
Well, it's the same thing with synthesized implicits. Every time you're just like, my ruby ring just got 4 fire resist implicit. Nice.
yeah, it happens a lot. It's good on. I think it's always good on the things where they don't have an implicit when they get one. I think that's always like, even if it's just like 10 decks. Hey, it's mine. I mean, it's 10 decks or not 10 decks. If we're not using an implicit like an influence item before, then sure, I take
Yeah.
10 decks.
It just comes at the cost of an influence item, which is such a small cost.
It just makes. I mean, it just makes it so that it's not like your endgame choice, but it can be like a good intermediate base.
Problem is, you get them at endgame. If you would get them early on, like while leveling, synthesis mods would be really cool.
Oh,
So would fractured.
you just have to heist early, then you get tons of them early on.
just ice level.
I never want to heist. But yeah,
Catmaster wants to talk about Ultimatum. We haven't talked about Ultimatum. This is my
Ultimatum?
segue.
Somad's Ultimatum.
It's a good segue.
Yeah, you wanted to
Good
talk
segue.
about the SOMAD topic and ultimatums. I think the SOMAD topic is more interesting than ultimatums.
Oh, that's telling.
I mean,
I think that's all we needed to know about Ultimatum.
we already
Oh,
played
so bad.
Ritual for 3 months, so like that's. I feel. I mean, right? They're different. They're definitely different.
They do more damage. I can assure you of that one.
I think the short and sweet of Ultimatum is I really kind of like it as a mechanic. I think it's fun. I'm a little sad they took half the rares out of it. But it's still pretty fun. It just came after a league that was almost identical. We already played 3 months of literally this.
But
so
imagine there was 3 per zone. Then it would suck.
Yep.
I mean, the thing is, my main complaint with Ritual was that I didn't like the combat because it was too spammy and too clusterfucky and not actually engaging. And then ultimatums are that, but a bit worse.
Well, and
I like everything else about Ultimatum, just not that.
It's going back to like the win state. If you don't quite have the DPS to clear the wave, you lose. It's a hard loss. There's nothing you can do it. There's no skill. It is just speed mob spawns. You're fucked. If you do have the damage to do it, you're like, and the wave's dead, and the wave's dead, and there's no middle ground where you're like, okay, it's close and it's interesting. So it doesn't quite, the idea great, but like so many things, the execution's not there.
Yeah, I have a hard time separating that issue from like the general problem in Path of Exile, that it's you're either winning or you're losing. There's little of like an in between where you're struggling to fight a monster for a while and it's a back and forth. You lose health, the monster loses health, you recover, the monster recovers. It's like a meaningful fight. It's either you one shot the monster or the monster one shots you. And I think Ultimatum does a great job at like emphasizing that problem.
We had to do such a long and a high amount of work in the PvP events that we try to get going, and the rule set, because we're like, okay, we need to make sure that the rules isn't like, okay, first person who gets hit dies. All right, okay, so these builds, they need to do these adjustments, and in the low-level dueling, the 28, we're allowed 1 support, because anything more than 1 support, and it is a one-shot meta. because it's that bad. Because yeah, if you one shot, you don't have the interaction of reacting to what the other player did or the damage you take, and without that, PvP is garbage. Obviously, nobody cares about PvP except the 6 people who PvP, but it's the same problem when there isn't an interaction between the build and the content. It's like you do get that great feeling of I built my build, I geared it up, I completed the content. Yes, but we do need some back and forth on different ones. Other than like Cirrus, where you just run around his die laser and like, oh, wow, look at this mechanic. I'm good.
Yeah, unless he does 4 mechanics at the same time with no audios. It's fine.
That's
Yeah.
normal things. You just build.
But at
defense.
that point, it doesn't matter what you do. So that's that's just the you lose scenario as well. And you just
Yeah.
like die beam, meteor maze, all at the same time.
But aside from that omnipresent issue, I feel like Ultimatum is one of the very best League mechanics in terms of League mechanics that spawn in your map and that are purely optional, right? That don't require you to go anywhere and that are completely avoidable by not interacting with them. I think Ultimatum nails the risk reward. It feels great quality of life. It does things with party play. It you have 100% control and transparency, right? Like as a new player going into an ultimatum, it tells you exactly what it's gonna do, and like a lot of things, like the freeze mechanic works really nice. A lot of things really make me think if that was last league's League mechanic released alongside the new Maven endgame, it would have been a way bigger hit than Ritual was, because it's just such a good league. Also, the voice acting is spot on. Like it's really, really good and really, really witty and sassy, but not in a kind of silly kind of way, like synthesis voice acting or betrayal voice acting, where it's almost in the realms of ridiculous and a comedic sidekick kind of thing.
I think really all the League needed was some small, potentially insignificant buff to weak skills, because people are just clawing to play something different. And when the skill, like this is probably the hardest League I've played in terms of a gear check, by a significant margin. And like I played Metamorph, and it is a hard League numerically, and they didn't buff any of the shit skills. So it's just like, oh, okay. So I'm further encouraged to play the meta stuff. You nerfed some of the top end, okay, which is fine, but you didn't help any of the shit tier, and then gave a League mechanic that you can't play the shit tier. So it's like, I'm playing the same thing again, I guess. Unless Val Ground Slam, because for some reason that needed quite the buff.
It does like triple damage now or something, as before. Baseline, yeah. I mean, at least we got one thing to try that you didn't before. And it's really good for ultimatums, because it has like roughly the AoE of an ultimatum. So you can just like stand in the middle, bonk, 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 and kill all the mobs. So that's pretty engaging, right?
Oh,
Instead of running around the outside, you can just run around the little centerpiece.
I love the mod that you can pick that reduces the AoE because everything spawns closer together. It's great for explosions.
It's really good.
That's the best one.
Well,
the Explode Chest loves that mod.
And it's beating the dead horse. Well. It is beating the dead horse. There's not enough mods. I think by the time I was in the 3rd or 4th zone of the game, I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. And it was the same thing like with the Alva Temple. Like I did the first Alva Temple and it's like, okay, this could be fun. I did the second Alva Temple. I'm like, oh no.
Yep. Like, so 12 more mods and only 2 choices instead of 3. And suddenly I'm doing a lot of variety continuously. Giving me 3 choices instead of 2 choices means I get to pick the easiest about 3 mods, and those are the only ones I ever take.
Oh. Yeah. I very rarely have one that feels different. And then the problem is the ones that you don't want, when on the risk reward, you're just like, oh, let's save for whatever reason you had 3 that brick you. It's just like, oh, what's the choice? You just don't do the next one. Like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you have 3 that like completely brick your character for some reason, then yeah, you just take reward.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unless
Oh,
softcore is like something so good that you're like, okay, on the off chance that I somehow manage to survive this, I'm taking this because that item is like, it offers you like a mirror or whatever. You're just gonna be in softcore, you're just gonna be like, I'm
Nope.
just gonna
Yes,
try
I'm
it.
trying.
Worst case, I fail and don't get the mirror. Okay.
And when you look about the design of it, I think the problem and in the design for me, once again, like the theme is and a bunch of those other elements is quite great, but the challenge is not the mods you choose and adjust your gameplay. It's the rare spawning with the stacking
Yep.
auras, right? And like basically you choose one because you're like, I can ignore this one, I can ignore this one, I can ignore this one. They don't matter. It's just really strong mobs that spawn. They could basically take out all of the options and just say next wave more rewards, and I would not notice the difference.
I'd be sad that we didn't get the arena get smaller one. That's the only one I'm happy to see every
The
time.
one that makes it easier.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, arena smaller, go.
Well, it's
'Cause
also
the
not
same
a
amount of mobs
downside.
just packed into a little area.
In most tile
Great.
sets, it's not a downside because you're already limited by the room size. So you're like, okay, this is just better because everything just spawns here instead of next door.
You don't have the heist thing where you're looking for that one mob or harvest ritual thing. Ritual thing where you're looking for that one mob.
Mhm.
Oh, in
Yeah.
Harvest, I had that also a lot with like the burrowing little
The freaking
suckers.
worms, man. The freaking worms. They just like burrow away, just shoot you from off screen. Like, what the hell? Who
They
thought
have-
that was a
burrow
fun? Okay, let's not get into that.
away.
I just I hate these things.
They have so much health and no lube, and I'm just like, where the fuck is he? Whack, 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 whack. Okay, he's gone. Where is he? And it's just like,
It's like, oh, whack-a-mole, the game.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
why do such small mobs have such high amounts of health and damage? It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
But yeah, I think Ritual overall is like a really well implemented league. I think I mainly just like the combat and the variety that I don't like. I think everything else is really cool about the league. The NPC, the reward structure, the whole idea, the UI is fantastic. The quality of life is fantastic. It's one of the league mechanics that at least I always call it Ritual. Yeah, I think Ultimatum is really good in that regard. It's like it has basically everything that this league should have, but the combat could have been pretty good. The combat also could have been worse. Like there are very little one-shot mechanics in the mobs. There's like no super crazy bullshit. There's no undeath effects or stuff that are like super annoying with the mobs. I actually think that it could have also been so much worse from what we've had in the past. So overall, it's a pretty good league mechanic. It's just not super interesting and super different from what
It
we
just
had
shouldn't
last
have
league.
come back after Ritual. Like,
Yeah,
that
if they
was-
had like, well, if they came instead of Ritual or like 2 leagues after this or 3, I think we'd
Yeah.
all be like, PogChamp, this is one of the best things ever.
It's clearly a league that would have been best alongside a big expansion because it doesn't have its own. Well, I guess it does have the inscribed Ultimatum endgame, but it doesn't really have much to offer beyond that.
I
More
don't
real
think that.
crafting.
It just needed to not be right next to Ritual.
Yeah.
It's just too.
Well, I mean, if it's not right next to Ritual, then it's a 50-50 chance it's next to a big expansion anyway.
Basically. I mean, Ritual was a big expansion, right?
The thing that I always judge leagues on once I'm at least, well, normally a month or two in, but that's how it feels now anyway, is later on when it definitely gets added into the base game and like an 8% chance now, am I going to be happy to see it?
I'm happy with Ritual, and especially
And I
with
think the
the
answer
notes
is
that we
yes.
can invest into it. Yeah.
I don't know why they don't just introduce league mechanics, like the new league mechanics, at that 8% interval. Because let's say you like the mechanic as it comes out, you're not going to get it in a meaningful way the way you liked it. It's going to be like tucked, except for a heist for some weird reason. Like heist spawns so much.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can just live in heist.
And then alternatively, like if we have the issue where they recently tried to declutter the amount of objectives that would spawn in a map by moving into the atlas, but instead they just use that new space to reclutter it immediately. Like I go into a map and I get 4 objectives, a Xana with 4 more objectives in it, and I'm like, this was a white map, I didn't choose it. So it's just like, why not implement the new league mechanics at the 8% interval so that they would get an impression of how it would be in the game long term? You know, going back to Alva in the Incursion League, the Alva worked fine when you get her occasionally, she was annoying as shit being in every zone. If they would have just implemented her at like an 8% or a 10%, I think the league would have been great.
To be fair though, Alva was only one incursion per map, and now with the permanent implementation, it's 3 per map.
Yeah, but there's also more completions per temple. We're up to 15 now, where it used to be 12. But the point was like, and you had to do the temple right away, where now you can sell the temple or craft it into a device, which is awesome. Like, that's a great tool that we have.
That's one of the best changes, yeah.
But
Amazing.
like metamorph organs barely make sense in the current game. Like, yeah, you can kind of buy them or whatever, but they're really awkward to go
Yes.
into Thane's laboratory.
Yeah, I'm still missing a
and-
brain. Like I'm 3 weeks into the league. I don't have a brain.
It
But-
doesn't even have a brain.
But that's the thing, right? If you implement it in appearing in every zone, then it's really awkward when like how much they have to shift. Like they're going to essentially have to revamp it when they could have just implemented it on a more long-term scale, and then they'd be like, oh, minor tweaks based off feedback. You know, ritual is very different. That you don't always have a ritual in the next map for the purpose of I can't remember the word where you're deferring. And so it just it designs a problem immediately. Like the amount of fragments that something drops, and then it's not the league mechanic, and then are they going to randomly get the amount of fragments correct to make us spawn it at a reasonable amount, or is it just going to be really weird to find the fragments to do the thing? How many people, Parandus is my example, you get coins because maybe a Parandus comes that you want to buy something?
I think the obvious, I can totally see that. Like we always have the thing where they dial back a league mechanic for implementation, then like they have to figure out the spawn rate or whatever, and have to figure out the the drop rate of splinters, of the rewards. Even cluster jewels suddenly like used to be a thing everyone uses, then they got nerfed as well. But I think the main reason to keep it as is that when people want to, they want to encounter the new stuff. Like people come into PoE for the new league hype. That's like the selling point every league, and that's like their big player base comes together again, or like new players come in because I heard Ultimatum League is up. I want to do these Ultimatum things, and they want to do the new content a lot, right? So I think that's why they. I don't think they would ever do it because they would risk like the main draw for a lot of people, which is I want to try the new thing.
Heist would have done a lot better if it wasn't the main draw. Just saying.
I think Heist might have actually, and I think other leagues as well. I think Blight, for example, I enjoy Blight. Like Blight is one of the leagues I really like. But when it's in every map, it freaking goes on my nerves at some point. Not just because of the singing, but because Blight takes you out of the mapping a bit. And every now and then that's cool, but every map it's just a bit too much.
So here's another way to say the same thing, but more aggressively. If you implement a new league mechanic in like the 8%, then 92% of my maps are standard. And that's going to be very boring most of the time.
Well, it's 8% per mechanic.
Right. But I get all those other mechanics in standard.
Oh, you're saying comparatively to standard. But they can also weigh something, weight it differently. But then at the other point in time, aren't you saying that... So if that's the future of the mechanic, and you're saying that that's potentially a problem, that in like 92 of the maps you don't get those mechanics, isn't that inherently an issue with the system that they've had in the game for 8 years now that they haven't dealt with, and they're just hoping goes away? Is this another to solved solution?
Like for me personally, I don't actually mind the standard base game. Like if they were like one new league's coming out and we're just not doing anything, it's an economy reset. That's it. We're just going to focus on working on something else. I would still play it and enjoy it because I like the base game. But I think without a 100% spawn rate on whatever the league mechanic is, a very large portion of the regularly returning people would just skip that one.
But even with the spawning at 100%, we get shit like people not seeing the Taskmaster encounter. So they like give it weird numbers so that players don't even see this stuff anyways.
Yeah.
That's a whole different issue.
That's a weird one, but that's a whole different thing, though.
I can find an example of every league where they find there's like, oh, this interesting thing that we're trying to sell you, and it's on our hype page, and you're not going to get it. You're never going to get it.
There are very few leagues that didn't have that. I think it's like Metamorph is one of them. It's like one of the few ones that didn't have it because there wasn't
because it
much.
didn't have a hype thing.
Yeah. I mean, there was a
The
Conquerors,
best thing
right?
about Metamorph was that you could see where the mobs were on your minimap.
I mean, that's still really good.
Yeah, it's still insane. I love
But
it.
yeah, a blight. I remember the like blighted maps were not dropping thing. That was like a thing for almost the first month. I think basically every league had some like all. I fought all the Crystal King in all of my PoE career. One, a single one. I fought him 3 times because I screwed up the first 2 times. But yeah,
I've never seen
Yeah,
Cool.
those things happen a lot, but like that's like, I don't know. That just seems like a different conversation.
yeah,
One
it
that
is.
I would agree with. Like it's a proper problem. Most people who have been playing the game, in fact, everyone who's been playing the game at this point, 2-3 weeks in, should have already fought a Trail Master. Even if you've got 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day average, 2 hours a day average, whatever, you should have found one Trail Master by now.
I think that would be
A
good,
lot of people just haven't.
Also, apparently he's like locked behind red maps. I think it would have
At least tier 11s. I know people who have found them in tier 11.
I mean, tier 11 is red maps, right?
Yeah.
So,
But at least it's like low red.
yeah. But I just think maybe that would have been a good thing if there was like white tier Trial
Versions, yeah.
Master,
Like Elder Guardians.
yellow tier like Elder Guardians, and then red tier one, which also have different drops, maybe like where the freaking gloves that are absolutely absurd only drop from the highest one, so they're like a chase item, and then you can't get like some of the cool stuff on the lower ones.
I saw those gloves. I was like, what the fuck is this?
They were 50C, by the way.
When were they? How were they 50C? I saw those gloves like
50C from
No
day
streamer made the
one
build.
until like, I don't know, what was it, like 5, 6, 7 days ago or something? They were like nothing. No one had made a build guide on them. And you know what? I knew they were strong. I saw them on the page. I made a mental note of it. I was like, those are going to be disgusting. And then I never checked the price. I never even looked. And then the price went from like 1x to like 70x in like 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, on the announcement page, I saw them and went, those are going to be disgusting. And I should have bought 5 or 6 pairs and just put them in the stash because they were like 1x each or less and they were worth nothing.
Yeah.
And I had tons of money, but I should have just bought some and put them away. I just never thought about it once the league started, not once.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
even
Just
in
missed
my
the
better
window.
trading. It's even in my better trading. There's a one button. I just click one button. It's automatically searching for them. I never clicked it the whole league. Just never occurred to me. Never thought of it again. And I lost so much money from just being stupid. And I knew before the league even launched. And I just never checked. Oh.
I didn't see those gloves for whatever reason, and then just like yesterday or something, I was just like, oh, what are like the uniques? Because sometimes you browse through, see something, I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. I didn't see these. These are some insane gloves. I wonder how much they cost. I'm like, oh dear God. I'm like, yeah, that's about right. That makes sense to me.
It's a reasonable price now that people figured out what you can do with that. But yeah,
Everything.
I mean, all infinite Val attack skills is basically what it is.
It was great.
But one thing that you actually did see that now is just starting to get traction is March of the Legion.
Yes, I saw a video
March
on
of
that,
the
and I'm like,
Legion's
screw
great.
you guys trying to take credit for this stupid thing.
Yeah, like there were like 3 or 4 people coming out like, yo, I found this super crazy interaction, super cool. And people like told me on stream, I was like, yeah, I saw PT do that before the league. And saying, yeah,
and
that's
then-
going to be good. And I looked into it, and like it like was one other person as well. I also like talked about it quite a bit. I was like, yeah, I know that was a thing. Like as soon as the item, like if you know the item, you heard the reservation changes, you knew that this was the thing.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that downside to the item that gives you 4 Supreme Ego Auras is gone? But like before the patch, there was the weird caveat with mines that they like cost the mana for a bit. And I was just like, they might do that with the aura to balance the boots.
Yeah, but Mark
they
actually, Mark said on Reddit and clarified that auras specifically won't have the mana cost thing, but they could have still put the downside on the boots. That's always the caveat I said. They could have been like, your auras now have a mana cost on top of a...
Stop giving them ideas.
I mean, if they decide this is... I honestly don't think this is much worse than, for example, Warcries. Like, you still have to press all the buttons all the freaking time to get this insane power level. And that's kind of like what Warcries are. You have to press a lot of buttons to gain insane power level.
The problem with it is simply hatred. Like, I don't see how
hatred is the
has
problem
existed.
itself.
Yeah. Like, because the other ones, you're competing with elusive boots, but you can Warcry with the boots, Supreme Ego, Hatred on top of all your other auras.
You don't have that many fingers or buttons because you also have to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your
I'm
plus
pretty
all the
sure we're
time.
all 12-fingered octopuses at this point in time with.
Yeah, I mean, and then while you're doing that, you also have to interact with chat as a streamer. So no streamer is ever going to play that build.
Too many buttons.
Too many buttons.
One more quick point about Ultimatum I wanted to address before we move on. And I think that this is a trend that continues through the entire podcast. There's just these extreme polarizing, like things are either worthless or they're multiple X items. People are either in a win state or in a lose state. In the same way, like with Ultimatums, I really like that it makes hinder jewels more interesting to have in your build, like hinder immunity.
Maim as well.
Maim, yeah. But at the same time, it kind of aggravates the problem of like you either in a win state and you have this, or you're not and you don't. Like there's little, I don't know. I mean, with bleed immunity now you can stack abyss jewels, I guess, and with ailment immunity there are more ways to get to that point. But it's still you want these mods. Like you want to be immune to Sabi, you want to be immune to hinder, and besides that, there's very little interesting, like deep interaction with the stat.
I mean, that's like the whole point is they just check boxes though. They're not interesting mechanics you play around. They're like, okay, what does my build need? Stun immunity, check. Bleed immunity, check. Ailment immunity, check. Hinder immunity, check. Maim immunity, check. Okay, they added a checkbox this patch. That's like some strain on gearing, which can make gearing more interesting or more restrictive. But you're not playing around that. Like, for example, when they added what's called the Razor's Edge or whatever it's called, the edgy ultimatum. I always call it the edgy ultimatum, where you get corrupted blood. When I was like, oh yeah, new ultimatum, what does that do? Corrupted blood, okay. Cool.
It does nothing. It's
Okay.
I was like,
They actually deal
added, like,
damage. I didn't think so, but like not AFK, but after an ultimatum ended, one of those blades, spinny blades, persisted. I was like, okay, let's check how much damage they do. I stood in it, chup, 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 got chunked down quite heavily. I didn't die, but like I was, oh wow, I'm not gonna do that again.
Yeah, they do damage as well, which is good. So they're not like completely ignorable once you have the jewel. But if you don't have the jewel, they are like, you just don't take it.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that when they changed the corrupted blood bleed thing, they didn't give the Slayer bleed immunity to add the corrupted blood immunity, because fuck the Slayer. Like,
yeah.
Wait, did they really not?
They
actually didn't. They did it with Pathfinder for some reason.
They did it with Pathfinder.
But Slayer just removes normal. He doesn't even remove the as unaffected by bleed.
Dude, Slayer has overleech. He's just gonna leech through the corrupted blood.
Unaffected by bleeds while leeching. Wow.
Yeah. Slayer's like,
and it's just like,
get bone slayers.
I guess technically, if you have the corrupted blood immunity jewel, you got the bleed. Like, it's technically not a loss of stats, but it's just one of those where it's just like, what?
Why did you forget about me?
I don't think they actually forgot, because a lot of people, it was mentioned.
Someone hates the Slayer.
Times.
Like, they're just like, Slayer's good, and to give them the soul tether thing.
Yeah,
and then
someone on the balance has a crush on champions and really doesn't like Slayers, because champions get away with everything for so long. Like literally every OP abusive, like defensive and offensive mechanic last patch got nerfed, except fortify stacking. For some reason, they're like, yo, fortify stacking, that's fine. Everything else has to get nerfed.
ED Contagion or fortify stacking, we got you. Just
I actually think that ED Contagion is in a fine state, like currently, because
I agree. It's been like C tier for like 3 years. Like it's not good, but it's also not bad, and it's enough to get you through all the time.
Yeah,
but it's never top tier.
It's like
that's a good state for a skill.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best balanced archetypes or builds currently is ED Contagion.
It just never gets, but the thing is, with it getting weaker, it's more because it hasn't been touched and mobs have been getting more health. And it's just like one more patch, mobs are going to get 30% more health, and now ED Contagion is going to be like, oh, we need that buff.
Yeah, I also agree with chat. It's probably not C. I mean, it's consistently at least C, but like 2 or 3 gauntlets ago, everyone was Trickster ED Contagion.
Oh yeah. I mean, Gauntlet is like not
That's
the base
popularity, not.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but those are 2 different measures. Sure.
Gauntlet is also not the base game. Like if something is S tier and Gauntlet, that can be unplayable basically for competitive softcore trade. that is the thing. Like slams,
Yeah.
for example, are god tier in Gauntlet on like hardcore like racing meta, whatever. They're good in softcore trade, but if you want to min-max softcore trade fast map, you're not slamming.
To be fair, I don't look at hardcore anymore. Like I'm sure that the 14 people still playing hardcore hate it when I say this, but I treat hardcore as almost irrelevant at this point. Like it's fine if people want to play it, but I don't care about it for balance purposes. Like it doesn't. Like what, a few % of people playing it still?
I mean, GGG said as much as basically they don't balance around hardcore.
Yeah,
and
I used to
they
exclusively play hardcore, but
yeah.
I don't know, it just doesn't seem relevant anymore.
But yeah, but ED Contagion is a lot higher because also because of how good Trickster still is. It is a lot higher in trades, probably like S tier to A tier, been like most of the time. But I mean, like to quote Jonathan, hardcore players kind of just have to deal with it. That's like their balance philosophy of hardcore. So
yeah,
and I think that is an okay approach to take. Like if they think that's where they want to balance the game, because you have to like cut some of the things. They have so many game modes that are very different to balance around, especially like with huge Gauntlet private league events happening as well. You can't balance around softcore SSF, softcore trade, hardcore SSF, hardcore trade, and like freaking OP all mod events or whatever, like half of the mods events at the same time without making it like the games as is in one league is already almost impossible to balance at this point.
I'm pretty sure most hardcore people want just performance, right?
Yeah.
They're
That would
not,
be a good
they're
balance
not making
point
a
for
build to survive a boss mechanic. They're making a build to survive 6 seconds when they're loading into the game.
Mhm.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah. You have to survive a lag spike more than a boss. Or at least that needs more stats. Especially an ultimatum. Like if you lag an ultimatum, like you better have an unkillable build.
So many good segues in that last topic to the SOMAD topic. I think we're finally gonna take that. One of the big points in SOMAD's I quit PoE is or quality of life is being held hostage by GGG is one of his points. Where it's like, oh, once a year we get a big quality of life change, like now being able to unstack things that you hold in your hand, shift click. But well, first of all, the entire thing. You guys have watched the video in its entirety.
Yeah. I watched the
Any
video.
first thoughts? Anything that comes off the top of the head? So you probably wanted to just go into that.
Yeah, I watched the video. I also watched Nugi's reaction, Rise's reaction, Ziz's comments. I think Taki's like adjacent video, I guess, like a similar topic video. I think Gazi also made a video. I haven't had the time to watch that as well. I think one thing that's very clear from like so many people reacting to that video is that a lot of streamers like have something that resonates with that. A lot of players have like have found at least something in the video that resonates with them as well. For me, like the criticism towards the game, that whole part, definitely there's like some good, really good points. At some points I don't feel that way the same way he does. But it was just like him saying his feelings and giving his reasoning. So like you can't argue, no, he's wrong. No, he feels that way about the game, and that's like a valid thing. He played like the game for like freaking 20 hours a day, like for 8 years or whatever. Like it is a valid point to take into consideration. But I could very much more emphasize with the whole like the streamer content creator side of things. A lot of things he said was like this exact same things I said in the video where I said I'm stepping down from going full time. A lot of things still ring true to this day, and I can identify with most of that part way better even than the criticism on the game, which he still had a lot of valid points. Also communication, like he mentioned like a lot of stuff that was like a 20-minute video, right? So yeah. But the content creation side is where I found the most points that I really like feel where he really hit the nail on the head.
That is fair. I feel like there's a lot of true points in the criticism towards the game, but particularly the criticism about the game feels also like there's maybe like 40% of having real gripes and 60% of already having your mind set on looking at it from a specific angle. Where like I I don't like to downplay like depression in real life, but like depression in real life makes you unable to appreciate the smaller things. And as much as you don't appreciate the smaller things, like small victories, small successes every day, that feeds into your depression and makes you more depressed. And in a similar way, I can see people going in a down spiral playing PoE because they focus on the things that they dislike, and they get a more negative, like a certain kind of shade of glasses, right? You look through a certain tint of glasses. And while there's a lot of reasonable criticism, it's also very, very clear that Somat wasn't afraid to burn bridges in the video and was really like done with it, right? Like he was sure. And
yeah, and he even mentioned the whole point of like he just says whatever like he feels right now and doesn't care about like with the consequences. And he also mentions in the video that a lot of people don't do that because for obvious reasons. If you're planning to have a career with like streaming Path of Exile, you will consciously or subconsciously hold back
I
a lot of the times.
disagree.
I think a lot of people, yeah, I know that you don't do that, but you are like, that's the
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I know.
that's like the whole thing, right?
I burned those bridges.
Yeah, but then also you didn't really have a career into streaming PoE after that, so
Well,
you could have, I think, but you kind of like went away, and after that, it's
Disappeared
difficult.
for a while there.
Yeah, that didn't
well,
help.
so I remember one of the things going through the comments and checking the video, and why I had a slightly different take is there was definitely some people being like, "Oh, he's not frustrated at PoE. It's just his life where he wants to be, and PoE's a little bit of an excuse." But I'm like, I burnt my bridges at the height of my career when I would have been at the time. Anytime PoE was being streamed, I would have been in either the first, second, or third like view stream. It's not meant to be anything beyond the context of this situation. And that's when I quit. Uh, I was in the two major podcasts at the time. I had been in State of Exile a few times. I had been in other, and like I was one of the faces of PoE at the time. I get to put my stamp on. You guys like SSF? Well, guess what? Uh, but
Did
the
he
same,
basically invent SSF?
I generally give the credit to Anuhart.
Yeah, he stole it from Anuhard.
Yeah, and when people so I was not happy with the power creep, and I was just like, I need to get more out of the game. Anuhart, you've played this in an ungodly amount of time. You have like legacy Calms valved for +1 resist, and how are you getting this much time? And it was just like, try SSF, do it this
Yeah.
way. It gives you better gear progression. And so I took his advice. I bought like 60 normal stash tabs so I could just like dump tabs in. This was before the premium stash tab functionality changed, and I'm fucking pissed about that. They changed it the next month. And so then I started doing SSF, and so Anuhart convinced me that I could get more longevity, and it was great. I had a lot of fun with that. But why I wanted to put my thoughts on the ring was when I did my burning bridges, and I stand behind my video. I haven't taken it down. I looked at it recently and I'm like, you know what? I'm probably most proud of the Fuck GGG elaboration video than any video I've done on my channel. And I wasn't in a position where it was like, finances are tight, or I'm not where I need to be. Like, I was a top PoE streamer, and I was just like, fuck it, I'm out. And it's been a thing where now people meme what Chris says, the 40 buff skills or things like that. Before the Reddit, and this was the funny thing, the Reddit was a blindly positive place for PoE. And like blindly to a point where it just made no sense. And to get pushback, you had, it's the internet. You have to continuously escalate. Pre 2.0, like I was the fanboy of fanboys. Like, oh, they made a decision that's questionable. It's probably because of this, whatever. But the key thing to me is when GGG shifts their audience to make more money, and they will make more money. I stated they would make more money. It means that you're just a temporary wallet to be milked until they see a larger audience. As soon as any producer of any product being sold to you changes that target audience for a bigger audience. It's just a question of time until you're no longer part of the even bigger audience. A lot of the complaints have been like the very grindy setup, like just to a point where it feels like it's wasting your time and not giving you the fun reward. If you're familiar with playstyles of Korean MMOs, they are grindy to a point where that's the
crazy.
meme. The Chinese audience is vastly superior to ours. You're no longer the target audience. You protesting and not buying a supporter packs, it was too late. You had the opportunity 2 years ago, and now when I played it, I'm just like do whatever, and I'll play it for like 3 hours. I'll do something else, and I have my private leagues. That's fun, but the ship has sailed, and it's not changing.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. There's some underlying decisions that definitely are like made with that. I think one of the saving graces definitely that the Chinese realm is separate from ours. So they have, and it also is very different from what we have. They have a lot of stuff in there that would not fly with like our current state of PoE because of how different culturally, like for example, like gambling stuff is viewed. Also, how MTX is viewed differently, and so on. But I think there definitely have been some decisions there have to be that wouldn't have been made.
Yeah, because if they aren't like if they're using the same base code, there's certain elements that you can basically just, oh, this feature isn't in or this one is. But like the Atlas, they're doing a system with it. Well, it's got to have some similarities. We don't know how much overlap there is because we're never going to get that information. We have to speculate, but we can't really be like, nope, nobody knows everything. Therefore, we can't have any opinions. And therefore, the podcast is people being like, nope. So we have to make a couple guesses here and there.
Looping back to Somat and what you guys said with also what resonated in chat. Any company that expands needs to make certain changes. The lack of communication that's perceived by Somat, where he's saying, well, they're holding QOL hostage and they give us like wrong information. They hype us up for the wrong things. Say everything is buffed and then everything's not buffed. Say the Val reliquary keys that are, the rarest and the most special keys ever. And a lot of people...
well, they didn't say that. They only said they were the most rarest.
Yeah, but the way it was marketed,
it gave people special. People just assumed special.
I mean,
that's on the people. They said they're the rarest ones they've done. And when they said it's going to be a Val item pool, non-legacy, I knew they were shit.
they did say exciting.
Yeah, exciting because
they are the most factually boring reliquary keys we have ever had.
They are.
And they said Heist was going to be the best league ever that they were so excited about.
I mean, they said that Harv is going to break the game, and that was true. So,
occasionally they're right.
Someone who lies doesn't mean they don't tell the truth.
That's true.
Right.
But because I think honestly, I don't know how much is on GGG, especially like the like hyping up of the 40 buffs and the Val skills recently, and how much is just on Chris specifically, because with the Val skills, he even said, everyone else is telling me to not hype this up, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I think that everyone is telling him to not hype it up comes from the last time he did the same fucking thing with the 40 buffs that also turned out to be pretty disappointing when you announce it as 40 meaningful buffs. If they said, we did some small numerical tweaks to like 40-ish skills, maybe some will go be a bit better, people would be like, yeah, that's what we got.
He probably read like a post-it note in the office somewhere where it was like someone's like, oh, look at these 40 skills. And Chris was like, 40 skills are getting changes. I'm just going to say that.
I mean, and if you've ever worked at a bigger company that has like a CEO who comes in like every 2 months and like looks what's going on and like has a rough idea what's happening and makes like the big executive decisions, but doesn't actually like see what's happening on ground level, that's what Chris has been for the most part, and he can't know that type of stuff. And if I've always viewed his appearances on podcasts as exactly that, I've never been disappointed because I always knew what I was going to get. But if that's not what you're used to with these types of people, then yeah, obviously their communication is pretty horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, those were just examples. Quickly into specifics of the communication. I think Soma says that it felt very honest back then, and it doesn't feel honest now anymore. How much of that do you attribute to like changes that have to be made? Obviously, when a company turns from a small company with a tightly knit community around the game that they developed in their garage to like 100-man company. Obviously, you can't have the same communication with your 10 times bigger player base now, but like yeah. How much do you think is that the natural development, and how much is there actually something where you could point fingers and be like, you guys are not as honest as you used to be?
The example that I would use when we're talking about the time frame of SOMAD, often pre 2.0, and like when you're a small company, you have to engage with your audience because if you're selling to 10 people and you lose two, that's a significant loss. If you're selling to 100,000 and you lose two, you don't give a shit. And that's just the reality of numbers. That's not right or wrong, but let's keep perspective. One of the first or second, I think it's the second State of Exile podcast. This would have been with Zeno, Ziggy, and Pox at the time. I don't remember if Pox was on this specific podcast. We had Chris. We were chatting with him. And one of the things that I brought up at the time, map mods did not have a quantity rolled implicitly in it. It was like the meta was alt regal until you got the quantity. And I said, Chris, on the podcast, I was like, why don't you just have quantity implicit to the map and then you just make the difficulty mods, give quantity, and therefore as the maps get harder, you get more quantity. He said that was a good idea and he changed it. It's a fun detail of where I used to be in the game and like my communications with Chris. Okay, and like now let's look at when Labyrinth came out, and from the first moment we learned about Helm Chance and that it would be one per run, we have been wanting a different system of Helm Chance.
Yep.
During ExileCon, it was brought up the example of what if you had three choices and you picked one. I don't know if it was Chris or Jonathan specifically answering the question, but they said that that would be a temporary solution because we're still going to have more skills. That's going to still make the pool larger. It's not going to solve the problem. And we don't want to implement a solution until it's a solution. That's what they said during ExileCon. I'm paraphrasing, but that is basically exactly what they said. And then they just implemented the Band-Aid solution, knowing the problem, once again, being not necessarily dishonest. Like, sure, there's the possibility that they like, okay, we need to put in something and we don't have anything yet. But let's go back to ExileCon. They talked about difficulty, wanting less people to do the high-end difficulty because the game wasn't hard enough. But they don't want to make the game easier because it doesn't feel good for a player to be doing X content and suddenly they can't do X content. And that makes sense too, but then you can't make the game more difficult by their own admission. Then they're like, but we don't want to just increase the health of mods. What happened the next patch? Shaper, 10 times health. Valve, 10 times. It's 10 times health. Like, so this is where it's like they're supposedly listening to feedback, giving us information, giving communication, but nothing lines up. And it's like, okay, so sometimes they'll say something that happens. When I quit in 2016, Chris said that they didn't want spammable movement skills. That was the conversation. That flame dash spam, whirlwind spam, it was too much. I came back, ain't fucking thing changed there. If anything, we got second wind and more ways to spam.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of the things that when they say something like we want this or I want that of the game, it's really easy to say that, even like for someone like Chris, like Chris, who's in a position to theoretically push that through. But like if there's like a team of 120 people telling him, yeah, you can't do this because of this reason, or hey, but what about that? And I think the game's just gotten to a state where it is way harder to do just do something, right? Because you have to like so many implications that you have to take into consideration. But I agree that some of the QOL stuff that so Matt mentioned, for example, the helmet enchantments, that probably wasn't a freaking like 5 month coding marathon to implement, I would assume. And that could have been done probably years earlier and have improved the situation. So I think there are some definitely some issues that GG are very stubborn on. Don't just give priority. That would be huge quality of life changes, and I can see why it would feel like that they're holding it hostage, basically, or like just not doing anything about it when it's can't be that difficult to do it.
So
Like,
there's a
understand where
really
it
good
comes
example
from.
of that still in here right now, which is that Flask spam is obviously garbage. Everyone agrees. Everyone from the developers to the players are all like, yeah, this Flask spamming thing is garbage. It's a terrible system. It's not worked out the way they want. They literally already have the code to be able to link flasks together in game. It exists. It's already like that on the other client, and they just choose to not turn it on because that's a temporary solution, and they want a
Wait.
permanent solution, not a
Wait.
band-aid solution.
Wait, what? You can connect flasks on the other client?
On
the
China,
Chinese?
you can.
Yeah, you can just say my flasks 2, 3, and 4 should all go off whenever I press any one of them. It's
Okay,
literally an in-game flask
I
macro.
didn't know that, and also that's not the solution to the problem that I perceive with flasks.
No, that's why they don't implement
It's a
it, because
solution
it is.
to carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah, it's not. It's a.
I want this.
Hi,
I've been
Carmel,
saying
how
on
you doing?
stream for like 8 leagues now that if I wasn't a streamer,
Yeah.
I would 100% be using a Flask macro. The only reason I don't use one is because I will get seen on stream using it, and then they will ban my account because that's the way they find you if you're using a Flask macro. Someone reports it, and I can't, and it hurts my hands, and I don't want it.
The best part of playing any other ARPG
That's
than
not a
PoE
thing, yeah.
is that you're like, ooh, I'm
Yeah.
not pressing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every 4 seconds. Could this one be good? Damn, it's shit.
I honestly
Yeah.
think, that's what I think we should do. We just should grab like all the streamers, absolutely everyone, and just agree to give GGG a freaking ultimatum. You have till next league, or we're all gonna use a Flask macro. You can either ban
Just we'll
every
all
single
install the
streamer,
exact same one and make it shown on stream.
yeah, and we're gonna
And
advertise
just be
it.
like, right,
We're
there it
gonna-
is,
we're gonna be like,
everyone.
and
You know what?
you got till next league to implement it. That's
You know
what
what?
we
Fuck it.
actually
Next
should
league,
do.
I'll use it. If I get banned
You-
from PoE for it, oh, woe is me. I've burned that bridge.
That's
I'll
the thing
take you on
about it
that
is
offer, Yoji.
that
I'll do it.
exists. That exists. They can just turn it
Yeah.
on. That
It's just
code was
copy code,
already
paste
written.
code. Yeah.
Okay.
They literally chose to not put it in.
Win-win.
I
Either I get banned from PoE and the community doesn't have to hear about me, or
Now I will be forever
get-
responsible for getting PT banned.
yeah,
Thank
fuck you,
Thank
Yoji.
Here's the thing. If enough other people did it, I would 100% do it. My hands hurt. This is a legitimate health problem.
But that's the thing. Like
Put the Band-Aid
everybody's
solution on.
wanting it, but everybody is like, I don't want to be the one. So Yoji's right.
Exactly.
Everybody needs to do it. It's just like,
Yeah.
and it's the other thing. Like, we have a problem. The other thing that's more realistic is don't buy supporter packs until they implement. Because if you're buying a supporter pack, I ended up buying a supporter pack because I was like, oh, this league coming out, it has, they're rebalancing old league mechanics. I've been asking for that for years. I want to get the league. Ritual was a fun league. Ah, man, you know what? I'm gonna buy the supporter pack. I've been funding the game through private leagues, but I was like, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And then we got this, and I was just like, fuck.
Still,
So,
I'm 100% on board.
Yeah, I think we should, honestly, like, unironically, unmeme, I think we should actually try to do that. If like everything is on board, what they're gonna do? They're gonna ban every single streamer? No, they're not. We just have to get every big name on board. Like,
Yeah.
Would
Not
be so
even
funny.
every. If you made it to like, I think critical mass is above 50% of the big people.
yeah,
If you get at least half of the and if we say big, just make it like literally like 100 and above.
Well,
people. Like, if you
from
got
the
half of
big
them, that
people,
would
I
be
can't
better.
imagine anyone who would not do that if it was really a thing. Like Ziz, Quinn, like all those people are critical enough.
yeah. If you get like, what are they gonna do? They're gonna be banned like Quinn, Ziz, Math. If everyone comes up, they're not gonna do it. Like, this is basically, it's not a we don't negotiate with terrorists. This is people being like, my workplace health is shit. I can't go to my employer because that's Twitch and they don't change the game. So I'm going to the people providing the work that I'm doing. That is actually just normal workplace health issues. And you're going on strike, basically.
Random
What?
question.
PoE unions.
Who here has stopped a stream saying that they're busy or something came up, but realistically they just felt that ting in their right hand and they're
absolutely.
like, yeah, I'm just gonna not say to my stream that my hand is flaring up.
Absolutely.
Because I've done
Say
that.
my hand hurts, but
I have quit stream 4-6 hours ahead of schedule because my hands hurt too much, and I was like, I don't want to keep playing. If I go and play another game, it makes my stats look horrible. I really can only stream PoE, and so I just leave, and then I do something. I go play another video game for 3 hours, but I don't want it to be. At the time, I'm enjoying PoE. My hands hurt too much.
I'm just in denial. Like it's like when you're on a long train travel and you don't want to use the public restroom, but you need to pee, but you don't notice it because you don't want to go there. And then the moment that you arrive at home, you're like, oh shit, I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and in the same way, like I just don't notice that my hands hurt during the game session. I just lie in bed at night and I'm like, oh shit, I really should go easy on those hands because I only got those two.
Yeah. The thing is that what people say, as Balor says, it's not a risk if literally everyone does it. It's not a risk because they have no choice. They can't ban every single Path of Exile streamer.
It's not like a skill that it's like, oh, I'm pushing just insane clicks per second.
Yeah.
Or it's like, hey guys, I'm the best PoE player.
I've got this thing right here, and what has to happen for the entirety of my quite often 18-hour streams is that I spend most of the stream going.
Yeah.
Fun and engaging.
Fuck.
But my bigger problem with the flasks is not like the mechanics of actually having to press them every 5 seconds, although that ties into it, but just the fact that they're up all the time. Like they could easily increase the amount of flask charges that you need by a factor of 10. And just keep the flask charges that you gain from monsters at the same, or like remove them.
But then
90%.
we're just talking about possible like proper solutions. And what I'm talking about is there's a Band-Aid solution they've had access to for 1.5 years that's literally do nothing except just let it happen. Like the code
no, you're right.
literally already exists.
There's
true.
Like there's kind of essentially a switch in Chris's office, which is just fuck player base's hands, and he's just like, yeah.
Currently it's on yes, and they just had to put it on no.
Like that's the one thing that's like
I'm
got me
sure
the most riled up is that.
With how much Chris plays, his hands don't hurt.
I mean, yeah, which is fine. Like honestly, if you don't play it much, but it's like a problem for mainly people who play too much anyways, but it really doesn't help. Like I've stopped playing a PoE League for a league to play other games because I didn't want to hurt my hand. Like whenever I feel like I got like this thing and feeling, I'm done for the league. And last league, luckily, that didn't happen as early because I didn't play as much the league before. But it's mainly
what build
PoE.
did you play? If I may ask. What
I
build did you
freaking
play?
play Cremation with like 500 support skills. For some reason, it did not break my hand. I was really lucky. But yeah. That was not a one button build. That was
and it feels fun and fine when you're being rewarded. It's like, oh, I'm skillfully pressing these buttons. Grim Dawn can be very finicky in the buttons when you're trying to like stack dots with 7-8 different abilities, and it's just like, okay, you're kind of doing an MMO rotation or something, but everything is methodical and there's a purpose. It's not just this weird subroutine that you have to do. Like it's not like it's slightly better or some weird thing. It's just like, no, you're wrong to not be doing that. It is just empirically the incorrect thing. You killed mobs, get the flask refresh, and it's I keep looking at Mother's Embrace, the belt that makes it so when you do minions, and I'm always just like, I could not press flasks with that. Can I find a build that I would love so much I would never play another build? Because then I wouldn't have to press flasks. And I keep looking at that belt and I'm like,
Yeah. It's tempting for that reason alone. There's also the micro distillery belt, which has the implicit that one of your fingers hurts less, which is pretty good.
Yeah, except it's increased flask effect, not more flask effect. So it was just kind of like...
Weird.
All right, here's something that's perhaps more viable of an option than actually using flask macros on stream. Because as was pointed out, many of the people who make significantly more money out of content creation than any of us probably not going to risk their livelihood. But you know what we could do very easily? Make one collaborative video where everybody has that opinion, shares it.
If you're not willing to risk your wallet, you don't care enough about the issue. It's the unfortunate reality.
Well, I mean, if you're streaming for a living,
But yeah, the thing is, I was just
And-
like thinking, would I risk my like current streaming hobby for this? Probably, because at some point I would have to quit anyways if my hand gets too bad. Would I risk like our plans with the house, like my kids and my wife and everyone having like a good place above their head and stuff? Probably not. For freaking video game, no, I wouldn't. But if such an issue would come up at a workplace where your health would be in danger, people go on strike for that, and people
But, okay,
risk
going
their
back to the
livelihood.
SOMAD thing, though, okay, let's say it's the people who can risk it or whatever, or people who, just like burning bridges, like myself. Sure. If that's the PR direction that GGG wants to do, and that how SOMAD is potentially incorrect about GGG not caring and just lying, I think that gives you a lot of the information about where you stand as a consumer and, what developers you should be, promoting or encouraging. I might not like Last Epoch, or I might not like another ARPG as much as PoE, but if PoE is just going to be some EA Blizzard thing that's like, oh, fuck your hands, we're just going to ban you because you're trying to get a reasonable change that exists in an alternate version of your game that you own, or that someone else owns, bought your game and said, that's fucking stupid, we're adding this, you can have your weird thing, but we're not stupid, we're putting this system in. If that's where they stand, fine. Like, take that award. I'll get banned for that. Like, whoo. But I do understand other people don't want to take that risk, but that's the thing. If you can't take that risk, how much are you playing the game for your enjoyment, or how much are you pretending to enjoy it because of a paycheck?
Yeah.
Very easy to enjoy something when you're paid for it.
Especially if it's like really well. Yeah, that goes like back to the whole SOMAD thing. Is I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with being well paid for something that you maybe don't enjoy as much as you used to. I think that's probably like 70% of people who have jobs at some point of their career. Like, yeah, if you do the same thing for 40 years, 8 hours plus a day, yeah, your enjoyment is probably not going to be the same as in the beginning. Like, let's be real. But you can still have a job that you enjoy, right? It's like the whole thing. I can totally like it's not as clear cut. It's not as like if you don't want to risk your streaming career for like freaking Flask macro, then
I'm not
you're like a
faulting
bad
those.
person, right?
No,
But
I don't mean I'm faulting that streamer. What the interesting thing is if GGG is gonna like mass ban a whole bunch of lower end ones, I'll be interested to see the fallout that happens with that PR.
yeah. But then the thing is like, who wants to be a part of that? And
Yeah, but it's definitely a hard one, and anyone who's potentially it's that thing, unfortunately, with someone who like likes a game, or you're putting up with faults, or you're wanting to be a content creator, you're putting up with the shit because you want to cozy up. That's the reality of not burning bridges.
yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing that I meant. That was how I was trying to get to, is that if you are not willing to risk like your paycheck, basically your streamer paycheck, for making a stand towards something in the game, then that's basically what I said earlier, that either consciously or subconsciously you will take some form of shit, or you will take your opinion, your actual opinion, not make a stand as much as someone who doesn't have that
Well,
naturally. And that I don't think there's anyone who can like who wouldn't take a
because
stand.
there's a
who can
very
say
big
that.
difference between not being willing to break the rule and not being willing to say the rule is bullshit and shouldn't exist. Because I haven't been willing to break the rule. I won't use a Flask macro because it will get me banned, and I don't want to be banned. But I will shout to the hills in front of everyone that it's a complete bullshit rule, that I should be able to use a Flask macro, that they should put the Flask macro in game, and that they're causing me physical pain and problems, and that it's their fault, and that it's as simple as letting it happen. And I will scream that all day. I'll scream it right into their faces. But I won't break the rule because that gets me banned.
But if that doesn't change something for 3 years, when's the point where you do something like more than that?
That's when
the question.
ARPG that's better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the question. If you're like, okay, yeah, I'm willing to go this far, and it didn't change something for 5 years, whatever, 8 years, 12, 500 years. When are you going to say, okay, I'm either going to try to do more, or stop it? Or are you not willing to do that ever?
Sadly,
That's the question.
realistically, for a lot of people with like, let's
Honest,
say an
neither. I
equatable
won't
problem.
do it.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people, when is their breaking point in this very obscure gaming context would be when
Yeah.
their hands fucked up that they can't play, so there's no
Yes.
loss in the sacrifice of being like, fuck this shit, macro.
I mean, there's a degree to which things can be simplified without compromising the hardcore nature and the heavy feel of the game. But I think another issue with RSI related problems is, for example, something that's going to go away in PoE 2, obviously, but having to spam jewelers and fusings in order to link an item. And I'm really curious about where you guys would stand. It's a little bit of a sidetrack from the topic list, but where would you guys stand on an auto clicker sort of device in your hideout where you can just put in a thing and be like, okay, stop at 5 link, stop at 6 link, or stop at this specific mod that appears in 1 out of 2,000 alterations. And then it just ticks down at a set rate and you can't accelerate it. So it will still take time. It's not like an instant result. You're not saving time, but it would save you 2,000 clicks. Would that dilute the game by a lot?
You mean like the harvest thing where it's like use 10 fuses and stop at highest link or whatever?
Similar, but you can decide where to stop. So if you wanted to stop on a 5 link, you could stop on a 5 link.
I mean, that's not really been an issue for me because I never really
link things.
Link that much ever. And when I do, I usually like toss in like 100 fusings maybe here and there. And I don't know, I don't like mass link stuff or like mass alteration craft like with like 10,000 alterations. But if someone does, I can totally see how that's a pain in the ass.
It's definitely one of the more short. It's kind of like a very small window of the flask problem in terms of it, because yeah, you know, when I've accumulated at a certain point, it's just like, okay, there's 2,000 fuse, let's go for the 6 link. It gets really annoying. Yeah, you can like mouse scroll wheel it with macro or something, but it kind of, like we were saying with the flask earlier, to me that seems more like the band-aid than the solution. Because in the chest mod example, when explodey chest was the be-all end-all to the start of a build, the issue is that one mod begins the craft, right? It's essentially the craft starts here. Like there's a way to like cheese it, but you know, if you think about it for an item, like this is the first mod that needs to be on the item or it's not worth it, and then this is the second mod, and then there's flexibility past that. You know, if you're designing a system that's skip 10,000 alterations until I get this mod, there's a problem that none of your fucking mods are interesting. And I'd rather put a chaos and look at an item and be like, can I use this? Rather than throw a chaos, don't see life. Throw a chaos, don't see. Like, you're just looking for that one mod, and as soon as you don't see that one mod, you just hit chaos again. So I would rather them put time into a solution of just like, oh, a mod being interesting on gear and wanting to think about it or do something about it rather than that. But it does make sense. This is the weird thing where Chris said like it's an ARPG, clicking is fine. Everyone's fine with clicking. It's just the amount of clicking and like the speed of clicking, because it's the currency, and then the end game needs a lot of currency to engage with it. And anytime you're faffing about, you're not creating more currency or clearing maps. You have to clear them as fast as you can, because the faster you clear them, the faster you see the rare events, because the rare events are the ones that drop the gloves that sell for 70 exalts. And it keeps feeding into each other, and those systems, when you're trying to optimize them, make the physical play of the game feel bad. And if we're playing a game to feel good, if we enjoy the feeling, the dopamine drip of the game, and we're fine with that state, we do need to ask so that the physical playing of the game doesn't feel uncomfortable. If you're encouraging us to play this way because they're encouraging us to play fast, then okay, can you adjust your system so that they're comfortable to play fast? Whether it be flasks, whether it be fragments, whether it be like, I hate crafting maps now. I used to love it, but I don't want to get a map, get a fragment, craft the map, make sure it's deliriumed, sextant the watchstones. It's like I am at the point myself where I'm just like, fuck it, throw the map in and go. Is it the most optimal for currency? No, but I don't want to spend all the time shoving everything together to optimize this map and then like placing all the things so that I could just like pre-optimize it before I do my map run, because it's all doing the same thing. That's just more loot, and it's a really uncomfortable system, and all these systems are doing the same thing: spawn more enemies in my map. Why do I have a sextant that is a fancy way of doing that? Why do I have a fragment that's a fancy way of doing that? Why do I have map rolls that if I'm choosing one of all the systems and then running it, it makes sense. Doing all of them together on every map, it just feels uncomfortable. And I don't understand why they haven't streamlined that in some way.
Yeah, that's to go like a little bit back on what you said. I think what also makes the flask issue like so bad is, as you said, like, if there's like some, for example, crafting, alteration crafting, you like have anticipation for like hitting that cool mod, and if it happens, you get like Dopamine Rush, PogChamp. I found the thing that I was looking for. Okay, I get to Regal now, and stuff happens. The flasking is just, you just do have to do this thing every 3 to 4 seconds to get to the baseline power level. It's just a movement tax on you to play the game at this point. There's like no reward. There's a punishment for not doing it. There's no reward for doing this, and I think that's what makes it so bad. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I think there are like a lot of like tedium gated systems such as Scarab, Sextants, that type of stuff. That there's no reason to not do them other than I don't want to.
Yeah.
There's no in-game reason. Like there's no, you shouldn't Sextant and like Scarab and whatnot and Master Mission all your high tier maps. And that Master Mission, the solution is actually really good to put them on the map device now. They just like tick the boxes. I think that has actually made it so that I put now my Master Missions on maps instead of before you had to run to your master in your hideout, which made your hideout so that all masters would stand in the middle, and cool hideouts were not a thing. So they did find a good solution for that, I think. But Scarabs, oh, Sextants are not that annoying. Scarabs are more annoying.
Scarabs should just stack in my map device and use one every time I launch a map.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead of
similar to the master missions where you can select it on the map device. That would also be the first band-aid fix that I had in my head.
You have the fragment tab like attached to the map window, like on the side.
Oh, that'd be awesome. It's just like a checklist of what you want to put on your map.
And then it saves that for the next map. As long as you have these, it would put them on every map.
Ooh.
Yep. That'd be sexy.
That'd be great.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, do we want to quickly give our TLDR on the SOMAT? Like everyone give a quick closing take, and then there's like 2 or 3 questions that we got on the Reddit thread that I posted yesterday, and then we should also end because we're closing in on the 3 hours. Actually, we exceeded them.
I think we're over 3. Yeah. Whoops.
New record.
Yeah.
So
way too long podcast. I don't actually know. Probably not with how long you sometimes go.
I think we had Patch Notes podcasts that closed in on the 4, but I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Balor, closing statement on the quitting PoE and streaming.
I never disliked SOMAT, but I never got into his content either. I just was aware of his existence, so him leaving didn't really bother me. But watching the video, most of what I related to was all the content creation side. Like almost from head to toe, agreed with almost all of it. I'm just not at a stage where I'm ready to give up on any of that. I'm still willing to do the sacrifices that he was complaining about. But
get banned
kind of nailed
next week.
Almost all of it. Like I'm very, very much on board with the entire content creation side of his video. I sympathize with all of it.
Catmaster, what's your thoughts?
What's my thoughts? Oh shit! I thought I was gonna get to go last.
That's right. I
then
put you on the spot. I'm
yeah,
the
exactly.
Take that. I've done podcasts before.
Now I can't say I agree with everything that has been said. No, I obviously similar to Balor, like a lot of the content creation things, it gets to you when you stream for a long time. You put in way more time than you would on the average job, and you get less out of it. But I also feel like that going into it, you kind of know that beforehand, that it's going to be a rough time until you make a full-time salary, and you might not get there. Like that doesn't come as a surprise, right? Yeah, you know that before you get into content creation, that the prospect of you actually making it the perspective is very, very slim. Like the chance that you actually get to the point where it's worth it, unless you are willing to put in several years of work below minimum wage and really putting in extra hours. So while I feel him on that, on the frustration, I think I also was never like, I never had the illusion that it's going to be different. And I see a lot of growth. I see a lot of positive impact that I have on people's lives, and people going out of their way to support the stream in very generous ways, in different ways. And yeah, I just don't think I'm done with that. And in regards to the game, it's true that the game is a very different game than it was back when I started getting into it in the end of 2014, when I watched ProjectPT, when I watched Xenocide Genius and Pox, and those people were all people that I looked up to. I was like, I want to be like these people. And yeah, now I'm in a position where I'm fortunate that I get a little bit of attention from stream, and it's great, but it's not the same anymore. It's not the same content creation. It's not like Twitch has changed a lot and PoE has changed a lot. But in regards to PoE, I'm happy that I'm able to say that I kind of do like both games. Like I like the old PoE and I like the new PoE, even though there's big differences. There are positive takeaways from both, and there were frustrations with both. That let me not overly glorify the old days of Path of Exile, because there was a lot of frustrating stuff that we had to go through.
But there was Dark Shrines.
The ones in the league or the ones in lab?
No, fuck the lab ones. Suck. They're not even dark. There's nothing about them that are Dark Shrines.
Well, in the original implementation, they were Dark Shrines.
They were, yeah, in the original implementation.
But now I think they should be renamed. Yeah, they don't deserve the name. They should be called Light Shrines or Soft Shrines. Because they only make the lab easier. There's no added challenge at all, right?
Or technically make it easier, but do nothing that nobody cares about.
Yeah, a portal to Azaro appears. Yeah, but I wanted to get a Dark Shrine still and a treasure key. Yeah, so a lot of things resonate with me, but I'm not quite at that point in my PoE content creation aspiring career that I'd be okay. Yeah, I'm jumping the ship as well and going to save myself as long as there's still time. I think it brings out a lot of positive reactions in the community and facilitates a lot of conversations that would have otherwise not happened. So I think that's a really great takeaway from that. But I'm sad to hear that someone got so frustrated and so upset over that they're quitting. And I hope that a larger part of Somat quitting, and I wish him all the best, obviously, it goes without saying, but I'll say it again, even though I said it on stream. I think he's a cool guy, a very entertaining dude to listen to. We had him on the podcast twice. It was always a very fun and engaging discussion. And it's sad to see someone quit over the direction that he sees the game and content creation go into. And I think and I hope that I'm interpreting it right, and I see that there's a lot of underlying frustrations with where he is currently in his life and where he wants to be in his life, and that getting so frustrated over the game and content creation is just his means of kicking off the bad habit of playing the game the way that he did. It kind of reminds me of me when I stopped smoking in 2017, where I was like, really, before that, I didn't really dislike smoking, but when I decided I want to quit, there was so many things that drove me nuts about smoking, where I was like, okay, this is disgusting, it smells like shit, everything is, fuck combustion, fuck inhaling any sort of micro dust, and it just helped me kick it off and to say goodbye without looking back. When I hope that a lot of the things that are overly negative in his video are just him antagonizing the thing that he wants to quit. But yeah, I talked for 5 minutes now, so Yoji, what's your closing statement on the thing?
I just liked how Chad was like, this is his TLDR, by the way. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot to unpack, so I'm going to try to keep it super short. I'm super happy that he brought up a lot of the stuff, and as you said, facilitated discussion about how toxic streaming as a whole can be, how annoying and sometimes just stupid the content creation meta has gotten around PoE even more. I think the bigger the game gets, the worse it's probably going to get because more competition, right? I'm super happy that I'm basically out of the competition thing. I can just do whatever the hell I want, and if I at some point decide I just want to make videos about Last Epoch or about, I don't know, Hello Kitty Online, I can do that, and that does have no impact on my life other than my community will probably shrink, which is a part of streaming I enjoy a lot. So I think that part is really good, and I think honestly think that I would have liked to see SoMat either come back part-time at some point, because you can make that work very much as it works. So for that part, he makes a lot of good points of like GGG's bad communication things that they have done, that they not grown very well with how fast their game and their audience has grown. These parts, I think there's a lot of important stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I cannot relate to, like a few things I cannot relate to with when it comes to the game, but that I can see where they come from, or I can see how they're a problem for him, because, for example, Delirious maps spamming getting nerfed does not affect me personally, but I can see if that's what you mainly were doing, and they get rid of that whole thing. It's not very cool. And yeah, content creation can be freaking omega toxic, and I think that's something that people need to be aware of. And unlike Catmaster, I think a lot of people get a bit debated into content creation and are not aware how hard it is, how much you have to push, how long you will have to make minimum wage. A lot of people probably think if you have a 200 viewers average, you're making a bit more than you are currently having, or if you're getting several videos with like 50k to 100k each month, that you're making a lot more of YouTube than you are doing, which is not true. And yeah, I think it's good that a lot of this is talked about more publicly now in the PoE community. I think that's really good.
I guess it's my turn.
Yeah, probably.
So kind of splitting into two elements. Obviously, with some of like the baseline complaints of SOMAD, there's some overlap between issues that I've had, and I can agree with a bunch of the points. But regardless, when you're agreeing or disagreeing, everything that individual values from a game is different. You know, whether it's being Balor complaining about his fucking delirium maps all the time, whether it's me complaining about balance, or you know, the speed of the game, and regardless, I think it's easy to say that you can't really compare old PoE and new PoE. I usually split the line at about 2.1, because I think that's when Ascendancies came out, and Poison double dipping. And it's not necessarily a problem, it's just there isn't a game that caters to both of those audiences, and sometimes you're being patient. Like, what if this patch you really don't like, you're a content creator, you're like, what, I'll ride this patch out because maybe it's going to shift and then I'll enjoy the next patch. And that was me back in 2.0 to 2.4, because 2.1 seemed like an oddity. So it was like, okay, you know, 2.2 will probably be closer to 2.1. And it never happened. And so that's why at 2.4, I'm like, well, this is the direction. Fuck it, I'm out. There's going to be a lot of that for content creators. What you specifically like is great if that specific thing is maintained. As soon as the game deviates, like let's say it doesn't do its race support, let's say it doesn't do its PvP support that it had done, then you're shit out of luck. Like, it's not coming back to you. And that makes sense. I think regardless, his video was sincere. Screw him for getting a positive vote on his fuck GGG video, you bastard. But like making the choice to leave when's appropriate for a person is great. So he didn't necessarily stick in too long. Maybe he's stuck in longer than he should have. I don't know him personally, and he's making decisions for himself. That should always be promoted. Going to the content creator end of it, it's always a very difficult one, because even when we talk about, you know, being more open and without, like, people are still choosing their words very carefully, because let's be honest, it's a financial problem. Rarely the problem with streaming is that you enjoy the game when you're streaming. If there was no financial problem, every streamer would play the game that they want. Well, if you have a financial problem related to your content, well, you would need to like complain or bring it up, but you're then complaining to the people that are supporting you, and isn't that basically like, hey, you these people who like me and aren't giving me enough money, I need more money. And personal finance
a
is
really rough thing to complain
yeah,
about
Mhm.
that.
and personal finance is a thing. Are you like are you giving money to the streamer and the streamer's happy, but how is that streamer spending their money? You don't necessarily know that you're supporting his content to create better content because that's what you want, or maybe you're supporting their cocaine habit. Who knows, right? And that disparity causes a lot of complications, and very few you have to have a very large audience to be comfortable to be like, hey guys, so this is my finance, here's the thing. And sure, everyone all of a sudden sees like a streamer buy a house or something, and that's great. But it is a financial struggle, and no one wants to be like, man, I can't stream because I'm not popular enough to make 50 more bucks a month. Like, you putting that on a resume? I quit streaming because I was not popular. Good, yeah.
Yep.
And
There were
it
not enough
becomes
eyeballs on me to make enough money to live.
yeah,
Mhm.
I understood SEO and I had a skill set, but apparently the internet doesn't like me. Sad face. An example I like to use was Wabacha, and he was a content creator back in the day. He wasn't able to get the viewers that he needed to do content creation long term, and he wanted
Mhm.
to. He put in way more effort than I ever did. Like, I've never done high end content, even when I was more successful. I just fart out a video, rant about something. And it resonated at that time. If you did exactly what I did before, would you succeed now? No. Am I succeeding now as I did before, doing virtually the same thing? No. And it we want to pretend that there's some kind of measure to success. There's a little bit on YouTube because of SEO, and that what's consumed is budget build guides. Just fucking shove that in a
Mhm.
title, copy paste that, different skills, put out a skill every time. Sure, whatever. And there's more traction you can make on that way and then shift to Twitch. But it's a very difficult thing to sincerely say to people like, guys, I want to stream, but I need about $100 more a month. So it's your option. You can either promote me some way so I can get that money, or I'm gonna go because I'm at that point where I'm trying to justify my time, but then people are like, "You're playing a fucking video game all the time," and it's that line of just barely making it to making it is a very rough line, and it's hard to communicate. Whereas when you're making fucking nothing and you've got 2 viewers, it's like, good, everyone understands that you're like, that if you're trying harder, you're wasting your time. Nobody needs to explain that to you. But it's a difficult thing, and like Twitch isn't going to support you. I got partnered on Twitch. Like unless
That
you're
does
making the
nothing.
money. Yeah, meant nothing. That was before Patreon, I think. So it did mean something for a bit when I got partnered, but yeah, ooh. And it's a hard
That's
thing. Like, who's sincerely going to beg for money and mean it? Be like, hey guys, these are my financial situations. My student debt came in, and yeah, I could probably afford this house. I'm living in this shitty place because you guys aren't supporting me enough. You can't be sincere. You'll come across as whining.
Yeah. It's like people kind of don't want to come to your stream and see your financial struggles. Basically, they come to your stream to get away from their own financial struggles, not to yours, probably, and
Yeah.
like have a
Yep.
bit of escapism and just like talk about their favorite game and have a chill time without real life responsibilities.
Video
I think
games are
that
escape.
is fair. I think that's a completely fair thing to have when you come into a content creation.
It depends how poorly you're doing as a content creator. People could be
Yeah.
coming and be like, hey, that guy is way worse off than I am. I feel good about myself now.
You're streaming from like under a bridge,
Pity
like a
also that-
cardboard box.
There's also that really like awkward place where you're between like 1 and 400 average viewers.
Yeah.
Where you're like big enough that people know you and consider you a real content creator, but not actually making enough to live. But if you just like break over the wall somehow, then suddenly you get like sponsors coming in from left and right, and you go from like I'm barely surviving to I can just do whatever I want now. And there's that area there that's right before that. That's a really fucking awkward place to be in because you're like, I don't make enough to live.
And I think
But
that
also,
is
I've got enough
funnily
subs and like people are around, and it doesn't look like I should be a charity case. But I'm not making enough to pay bills. What do you do now?
yeah, that's what I meant when I said that a lot of people probably get debated in a bit because they think at that point you probably are way better off than you actually are as a content creator. They think,
Yeah.
if I make it to like 200-ish viewers on average, I'm gonna be just fine. No, you're just like,
Like,
depending
no,
on the country you're in, you
not.
could be doing fine, honestly. Like if you live in a country where earning a few $100s is a lot of money, then yeah. But if you're like living, I don't know, in freaking, I don't know, what's expensive to live, central London, then it's probably not as easy to make a living on that because that's not even your rent. Yay! And yeah, I think
Amsterdam. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Amsterdam is expensive as hell.
For example, yeah, whatever. Like if you live in an expensive place, and I think that also warps expectations of viewers a little bit as well, where they like don't really know where you are at.
But it also warps streamers because
Oh, yeah.
Balor talked about earlier, strain on his hand, and he was just like, okay, I'm gonna do something different. Even though he was playing video games that he could have streamed, he didn't stream it because you have to maintain the presence of numbers. Streaming is an image. And that's why people would be like, are you an asshole in person or is it just your stream image? I'm an asshole in person. But, you still curtail your stuff certain ways. The type of asshole that I am in person is slightly different than how I'm in stream. And
that's amazing, though.
The aspect
mildly different asshole, yay.
And then that's a different thing because it's like, okay, you went to play video games on your downtime to rest from video games, which sounds like the greatest asinine first world problem. And it's a wonderful problem to have in theory. But then that's the thing about the finance making you in a position where you can't be like, hey, you know what, guys, I am going to do the 1, 2, 3, 4 stream and potentially get banned because you have to make so many sacrifices of your content for that pursuit, and then you're unfortunately chasing the SEO or stuff. I remember seeing Yoji relatively recently. He started to do more clickbaity titles. He was against that entirely. He was against that entirely when we were first discussing, but it's the thing of like, there's more content creators. It's the reality of the situation. Like, is this a battle that I want to win? Like, is this a moral victory that I'm like, yeah, fuck my YouTube channel. I didn't use clickbait titles. Wait, who did?
It's really that. I was actually like experimenting a bit with like different SEO things and like clickbaitia titles, more red arrows on my thumbnail, just like to see how much it actually does. Because I talked to a few people like, it makes a huge difference. I was actually trying it. The dumb thing is, it actually makes a huge difference. That's the dumb thing. I didn't actually change my content though. That's the thing.
I know.
I just like put a dumber title and more caps, more red arrows, and more numbers. I was like top 10 reasons instead of just naming 5 things. I just top 5 reasons, and everyone clicks on it. Cool, top 5 reasons. I mean, that's how the human brain works, but it's just dumb. And I see that in myself, how I click on stuff as well. It's so horrible.
The worst one for me is I hate every video because there's that part in the video that tells you to subscribe, and I hate it. I fucking hate that. And no matter who I'm watching, and that comes up. And I remember first doing it in one of my videos around when I was doing the Essence trade, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, are people just literally that fucking mongoloid retarded where they're like, "I like this content. Wait, I can subscribe."
I've literally never put that in a video yet. Is it really actually worth doing?
It is insulting how immediate the result was. I was just like, you're fucking kidding me.
When I recently noticed something else. If you just put like a little graphic, that already worked. I feel like just a little graphic putting up just like subscribe button without sound, without anything, just like at the let's say like the first part of the video, that does something. But if you actually put it in a funny way into the context of the video, then suddenly people subscribe. I just made like a freaking 500 subscribers on one video just because I put it into a funny way as a natural part of the discussion. And people were actually commenting that I just subscribed just because you're telling me in a funny way. Like, it's crazy how that works. But yeah, if you make it funny, that's way better.
It's depressing. And then that's the weird part where you're just like, and it can burn you out as a content creator, because are you making the content that you want, and you've just slowly transitioned, and it's just like, like I hate personally anyone who's been in my stream, like I have no notifications whatsoever, because I like to talk about the game, and it relates to Somad's quitting, but it is not how to grow your stream or anything like that. Like it is that line where you're like, I am choosing to lose money. I have accepted that.
Yeah.
And there's all the notifications.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have a line. I'm not sure I have a hill I'll die on.
Then you
I
will
just
be
need
Content
to make
creation
it-
wise, yeah.
I just
then
need
you'll
to
be
make
good
enough
at the
money.
content creation.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
in that case, you should definitely do like the subscriber
mean,
setup.
And then in
That's
5
not
years, I
true.
can do fuck BalorMage
That's not
elaboration
quite true.
video.
I
Like
won't
how he
lie to
sold
people.
out to what he was and what he is now.
Yeah, that's not quite true. I won't lie to people. I will clickbait the fuck out of things so long as the actual content in the video is like related to the. Like if I'm tricking you into getting good information, great, let's go.
I
I'm just gonna
feel
learn how to be
bad.
better at it.
I feel bad when I'm playing some games, because I'm like doing Last Epoch, and I'll be like the top streamer because so little people are playing it, and someone comes in and it's like, oh, should I play this game? I'm like, fuck no, it's boring. Don't
Which is
buy.
like
Buy
super
Grim Dawn.
weird. That's super weird. We feel like but you've been playing this game for like, I don't know, 6 hours a day for the last 6 weeks. Yeah, it sucks.
So yeah, so you got you got a solid amount of experience to base that opinion on.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
like
and that's
this.
the problem with it. Are you going to judge an ARPG on like 3 hours? And like some people ask me, are you playing that? It's like, I really want a full view of it so that I can shit on it.
Yeah. I mean, and like to be fair, like we've been like complaining about the game a lot, but I honestly think PoE is still a fantastic game to play. I'm really enjoying it a lot still, for the most part. But I think we've just like a very negative based focused, or like even
You
I
have
like try
you
to
have me
play.
on the podcast, so it just happened.
Yeah.
Blame it on me.
But even you
I'm
have
just gonna-
oh yeah, please.
I mean, I also have like I have a lot of complaint on PoE, but I'm still playing it. I wouldn't be if I wasn't enjoying it. And I've been playing a lot less this league because this league wasn't as exciting for me, right?
I play for no lube in PvP. That holds me. It's a lot of fun, but as I said, as anyone people ask me like, why am I still playing PoE after the video? Because every RPG that's come out in the last 5 years has been terrible. And I am just waiting for a reasonable ARPG with meaningful customization, and I'm gone. I'm not. I've burnt my bridges, but I am a person who loves ARPGs. It is my genre. I play it to death. Grim Dawn is fantastic. A little bit of limited endgame, and I've just been playing different ones here and there. Because sometimes old ones have fun design elements. I had a ton of fun playing Dungeon Siege. Love that game. But you know, maybe PoE 2 is going to resolve all of my problems. I don't think so. Maybe D4 will be good. I just want to play an ARPG that respects my time. And when I'm playing the amount that I play, and I could, in theory, be being paid for my time, and I'm going, PoE doesn't respect my time, that's a big fucking flag.
Yeah,
Boop.
Boop.
I think that's
that-
a reasonable
That could
take.
be our new record.
All right.
It's exactly 1337 o'clock for me now. I think it's the perfect time to end the podcast.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, once again, I think I can speak for everyone wishing Somat and Christor, or however it's pronounced, the best luck with their future endeavors. We're all hoping, of course, to see them back in some sort of capacity, and if it's only in person at one of the various meetups that are going to come up and European TwitchCon and stuff like that, that would be great to have a drink, have a beer together, coffee, whatever you prefer. And yeah, before we end the podcast, I want to quickly thank you for coming on. Thanks, ProjectPT, for taking the leap of faith to be on a podcast you haven't been on before.
A bit rusty.
And sorry, what did you say? interesting or
I said I was a bit rusty.
a bit rusty, right?
Rusty on the podcasting, yeah. So it's been a while.
No
Just
one
a bit.
noticed.
So,
And yeah, thanks Yoji as well, as
Yeah.
usual.
as
And
usual, I've been on a lot, I feel.
and of course, thanks chat. Thanks everyone for sticking around, for coming and checking out, remaining positive. I mean, chat was at times having an own parallel discussion, but it didn't become abusive. It was all very, very
Yeah.
with good manners, and that's not
Can I plug something before you end the podcast?
absolutely, please
Go.
do.
So not the weekend coming up, but the following weekend, there is going to be a community PvP tournament. The exact set of the rules we're going to hammer out, but the rules for building a character are complete, and they're on the PoE PvP forums, which do exist.
Do you have a link for me to put into chat and into the description of the video?
It's the actual
and the
official
podcast?
website for
Yeah.
PvP forum.
Yeah. I can
I'll
get
find
one.
it. It's probably linked in your chat, just for the VOD and for the podcast upload on the podcast platforms, which is going to happen. For those of you who missed the episode, you can watch it in full on BalorMage's YouTube after it's been done uploading. It will take a while, but also in the next 24 hours at some point, it will be on all podcasting platforms. That is Spotify, Deezer, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all the various funny names that are too clunky to actually say. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks for being around, and see you in 2 weeks from now for episode 54, which we're going to announce at some point in a week from now with the guests and the time. Until then, have a lot of fun in Ultimatum. Bye-bye.
Bye.